Yet another superstar of the cycling world takes the yellow jersey for the first time. It is Greg Van Avermaet, the next wearer of the maillot jaune.
It's quite hard to wearing yellow here in the Tour. I did the Tour several times, and it's my first yellow. I think for a type of rider as me, it's really hard to get the yellow jersey, and I'm so happy that I have it. Stage win is something, but wearing yellow is the most beautiful thing, I think, for a cyclist.
And there from earlier on today are pictures of Greg Van Avermaet's beautiful thing. Sacred thing too, perhaps, as the new race leader crosses himself in the rollout. Let's confirm his good news from yesterday then. He now leads the race by 5 minutes 11 seconds from Julian Alaphilippe, with Alejandro Valverde a couple of seconds back in third. Joaquim Rodriguez is fourth, ahead of Chris Froome, but although the group of favourites has slipped well behind Van Avermaet and shuffled in order slightly, they stay level on time with each other. Alberto Contador, though, is now a minute 21 behind the other favourites group, and Vincenzo Nibali nearly 9 minutes adrift. Today's home straight is pretty straight and dead flat, although there are some bends and roundabouts quite late on the run-in, and the route is lumpy. For the first time in 4 stages, though, the distance has dropped below 200 kilometres. 190 it is from Arpajon-sur-Cère to Montauban, as the race leaves the Massif Central and closes in on the Pyrenees, where the overall favourites will face off again. Today, though, should be a fight between the Breakaway and the sprinters teams, then between the sprinters themselves if their teams have done their jobs correctly.
Well, the sprinters' team's jobs look pretty simple actually today, because there are just 2 men out front. Jan Barter, who you can see there, who's just gone ahead of his breakaway mate Yukio Arashiro to take the points at the intermediate sprint. Those 2 have been out together for Bora Argon and for Lampre since kilometre 3. But the bunch is keeping them at a steady 4.5 minutes. And as well as BMC, the team of the yellow jersey working on the front, Dimension Data have got a man up there, and Lotto have got a man up there. So the sprinters teams are interested in this one, and it looks likely to be a bunch finish. So an unlikely breakaway succeeded yesterday. This looks even more unlikely.
Yeah, and I think this first week's turned into one of a more traditional type of tour, with the sprinters getting plenty of goes at it. They haven't got many, though. This is probably their last before the rest day, at least. They get thin on the ground till Paris, in fact, so they have to make the most of it. There's no way this breakaway is going to succeed, and you can see them already starting to control it. They're not going to get caught out, and we're going to see a mass arrival.
And I suppose if the pressure's on anybody, it's the one of the big 3, Greipel, Cavendish and Kittel, who hasn't got a win. That's Andre Greipel, and he's got an astonishing run going. Every Grand Tour he's ridden since 2008, he's won at least 1 stage, and he sort of likes it when everybody's a bit tireder and the stages are a bit harder and lumpier, so perhaps this is his day. Yeah, it's a good one for him. We've had a little look at the run-in. There are some turns and a few twists, nothing too bad, and some narrowings as well, but in fact, I think that's actually going to work in the sprinters' favour, because it'll just lengthen the sprint out, or lengthen the field out, and allow them to get on with doing their job. So an ideal setup for them. OK, so the 2 leaders are through the intermediate sprint, and as you can see, things are winding up behind them for the points. Let's get over to commentary with David Miller and Ned Boulting.
Thanks, Gary. Perfect timing. A couple of 100 metres to go. The green jersey worn by Peter Sagan today on the wheel of Marcel Kittel. Those 2 riders look like they're going to contest it, with Brian Coquard working hard to get on terms with Kittel. It looks like it's Kittel's at this point, though. But Coquard, well, this is a full-blown sprint. No sign of Mark Cavendish mixing it at the moment, but he's a little bit further down. So that is your 1, 2, 3, 4. Peter Sagan taking 3rd place, and Marcel Kittel losing out a bit after a full-blooded sprint. There's Mark Cavendish. He's just rolling over in 6th place, defending his position, essentially, vis-a-vis the others. So Peter Sagan in the green jersey today. It readjusts your vision a little bit. We've been used to him in yellow, but the yellow jersey, well, you can see him there, 3rd from the back, and that is worn today by Greg Van Avermaet from BMC after his stage win yesterday. So, Mark Cavendish started today in 2nd place in the green jersey competition on 146 points. Peter Sagan leads the way on 150, and Marcel Kittel started the day in 3rd place on 142. So by my reckoning, Marcel Kittel has closed the gap to Mark Cavendish to within a couple, 4 points. No, 2 points, let's get that right, as things stand. But of course, plenty more points available on the finish line today as Mark Cavendish moves to the front. And interesting little glances around. There are 3 Ethics Quick-Step riders there, Marcel Kittel being one of them, with a couple of his domestiques, and Mark Cavendish and one of the Dimension Data boys too. So Coquard taking the sprint.
looks like Michael Matthews there as well. So it's interesting. We've seen him getting more and more up there, Michael Matthews. Maybe he's deciding to go for this year and give it a bit of a practice. He's still a young bike rider, and we know he's almost like a younger, smaller version of Peter Sagan. He's got very much a similar style of bike riding, and his abilities lie in sprinting and the classics as well. We've seen him at Amstel nearly win it twice, and also the World Championships is a race that he really covets, and so these are the sort of same objectives as Peter Sagan, and maybe in a few years he'll also be going for Flanders, but this is the first time we've seeing him up there giving it a bit of a nudge in the intermediate sprints, which no doubt his direct sportif Matt White said, look, if this doesn't matter if you're going to actually wear the green jersey or not, but try and give it a go this year and see what it's like to chase that, because maybe in future years it'll be something you go for.
Congratulations from Marcel Kittel to Brian Coquard. Those two gentlemen contested that incredibly close call day before yesterday, when Marcel Kittel edged out Brian Coquard by just 28 millimetres. Further back up the road, 4 minutes and 4 seconds to be precise, with 109.3 kilometres remaining. Jan Barter is in his second breakaway of the Tour de France, having been up the road for Bora Argon 18 on day one. Well, he's at it again, and this time he's got a rider from Lampre Merida for company, Yukiya Arashiro. Now, you'll be familiar with him if you've been watching the Tour de France for the last 6 years, because that's how many he's contested. But this is the first time he's done it in the pink of Lampre Merida, the Japanese rider. Up till now, he's been a Europe car rider. So he's swapped green for pink, and Peter Sagan has swapped yellow for green.
It was quite telling in that sprint as well. It's the first time we've seen Mark Cavendish not even hold the wheels. He realised he was in a position where he was going to score points, and he didn't even engage his pre-sprint. He let the other guys do it. The only guy who really went for it was Coquard. The other guys sort of put it in. They got into fourth gear without moving it into fifth, and I don't think Mark left third gear. He just kind of dropped back and was happy rolling sixth in that group, which put him on eighth on the line. Which is maybe we know what Mark Cavendish is like sometimes when he's purely focused on the finish line sprint, which all those guys are, but Mark Cavendish was really showing that the intermediate sprint, maybe he's already slightly letting that competition go.
BMC's Greg Van Avermaet in the yellow jersey. Slightly unusual to see him right at the back of the peloton. He's not been there all day. He's had his team up front. If not doing the work, then sharing the work. So, as you'd expect, the team of BMC are prominent towards the front of the peloton, just looking after the yellow jersey, who, for now, at this stage of the race, where all is quiet, has dropped back to enjoy a bit of time off in the yellow jersey, essentially, at this quieter phase in the race at the back of the peloton. It's an interesting bit of neckwear that Arashiro's got on there. Don't know what quite that is. I don't know whether it serves a function or whether it's just decorative. Weighs a bit though. Should imagine a few extra grams that you might not necessarily.
I think we'll have to ask Daniel Friebe to find out what that is.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, from one fashion-conscious Japanese rider to another man who looks the part and delivers, Peter Sagan could be a day for him to place himself highly in the sprint once again today, or who knows, even win it. The yellow jersey, though, well, that is gone for Peter Sagan and won't be back on this edition of the Tour de France. Not bothered, though. He's in green. 108.2k remaining.
He's in low.
Welcome back. 104.6 kilometres of racing still to go. The pair up front have an advantage of 3 minutes and 30 seconds, so the sprinters' trains have this very much under control. You've missed nothing while you've been away. Daniel Tekla-Heimanot for Dimension Data is setting the pace, trying to set things up for Mark Cavendish, one of a bunch of teams that are interested in the stage result today. So not much happening out on the road, but we thought we'd give you just a little sneaky glimpse inside our commentary position at the moment, and this is what it looks like. This is the glamour of TV. This is where David and I have our commentary position set up on the finish line, and David, that's the journey that we've embarked on. So I've got a map for reference point all the way from Cherbourg in such a straight line down through the Massif Central, and that's where we are today in Montauban. All the bits and pieces of kit that we need, our information here, a little secret guide to the Tour, because it's a sleepy enough day out on the race today, just to try and bring you some of the history. Big day for Brian Coquard potentially though today.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's legitimately up there with the best sprinters, so it's no longer a battle between Greipel, Kittel and Cavendish. There's now a fourth man, and that's Brian Coquard, so that's great for French cycling.
Absolutely. That's kind of set the scene for you inside here. Let's get back into the race pictures, and there are our two men up front. Arashiro and Jan Barter, the two men in the breakaway today, and they are almost certainly doomed. Now, we did try just a couple of minutes ago to establish contact with a very important man in a team car out on the road today, and I think he's there, so I'm just going to ask the question and hopefully get an answer. But Brian Holm, Director Sportif from Ethics Quickstep. Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. Brian, obviously a big day for Marcel Kittel today. That meant an enormous amount to the team and also for him and his confidence and what he thinks he can achieve, that victory 2 days ago.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Cav, he was beating us serious the first two sprint. I mean, the second point sprint we didn't even join because Kittel, he was boxed in. So getting his win, I mean, honestly, it was quite close because Coquard, he was coming from far behind at a very high speed. And today it might be slightly different because it's more flat sprint. And but I mentioned Berta, Lotto, and Quickstep here, we controlling the race was honestly a bit easier than expected. It was very, very hard course, twisty corners up and down from kilometer zero. But I mean, nobody really attacked, so we thought it would be one big attack the last 50, 60 kilometers till the break was gone. But from kilometer zero, nobody attacked, and after all, two riders in the breakaway. So for the moment, everything quiet. It's like racing back in the 80s.
Hey, Brian, it's David Miller. Just a quick question, because obviously a lot of people do know this, but many don't, that you worked closely with Mark Cavendish for so many years, from the beginning, from when he first started to through the majority of his career. What are the key differences for you between Marcel Kittel and Mark Cavendish?
Oh, they're from different planets, you know. They're like... I mean, with Cav, you know, is always what we call it. There's always some noise around him. He's loud, he's funny, you know, like... You love him or you hate him, you know, and nothing between, you know. He's, let's say he's quite entertaining to work with. And Marcel Kittel, he's more like Tony Martin, he's more like Greipel. He's a bit more German, less noise. And the thing they got in common is like they're bloody fast, aren't they?
That's definitely true. Brian, the main men, if you like, in terms of the lead out on this Tour de France seem to be Lotto Soudal and your team, Ethics Quickstep. Lotto have done an awful lot of work so far in the closing kilometres. They haven't delivered Andre Greipel correctly yet. But your train, especially for Marcel's victory the other day, got it absolutely perfectly right in very difficult circumstances. You must be very pleased with the way that your train is working.
Of course, but like turning back to stage 3, you know, our lead out stage 3, let's talk proper English, you know, old school. We fucked it up, didn't we? It was horrible to see. It was the worst lead out I've seen in my life, you know, getting around that corner, you know. Marcel, he never sprinted when Cav was beating Greipel pretty close, so that was like depressing bad what we did, to be honest.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a meeting in the evening. We saw it 200 times the video, and we tried to solve the problem, tried to fix the problem. And the day after, we were winning, you know. And now, I mean, of course, Glasgow got a bit more pressure, but you know, for the same money, it's going to be us. We all thought of the same boat, you know. For sure, Cav, he got less of lead out, but he's like getting back to the roots, like finding his way through alone. So probably the best lead out man in the world is like Renshaw. But of course, Renshaw can't do it alone. But like Cav, he won his two stages, so whatever happened, they're home safe also.
Brian, thank you for your time. We were on live television, so on behalf of our viewers, I apologise if anyone was offended by some of the language that Brian used there. But nonetheless, hey, Brian, thank you very much for talking to us. Always great to get your insight on a race like this. And I wish you all the best and your team on today's race. Well, he's once again, apologies for his language, David, but that is what you get with Brian Holm to some extent, and he is brilliant at what he does as well.
He's brilliant, and he's Danish as well, so I don't think the language perhaps he didn't quite understand.
That's true.
The gravitas for an English TV channel, but Brian's a fantastic director of sports. He's one of the best in the business, and he's so good with his riders. He creates that bond between them where he manages to keep the respect but also be close to them, and that's very difficult to do, and yet Brian manages to do it with rider after rider, and I think everybody in cycling would love to work with him. He's also just a cool dude, perhaps a little bit cool there for our TV, but that's it. And I think to have worked with Mark Cavendish for so many years, and he decided not to go with Mark Cavendish to Dimension Data and stay with Ethics Quickstep when he'd originally gone to Ethics Quickstep with Mark Cavendish, and that goes to show how content he is in this team, and I think rightfully so. It's a great team, Ethics Quickstep, and what they do year in year out is there's few teams that are capable of doing that.
Well, they certainly got it right the other day for Marcel Kittel. Lotto Soudal didn't, and they haven't so far at all. They've done a lot of work for absolutely no reward so far.
No, they're very much... Lotto Soudal are taking it from the front. They're not playing any games. They're the ones controlling the race mostly. This is the first time we haven't seen them really, the whole team at the front. They've just put one rider in today, and they're going to play slightly, by the looks of it, playing it a bit later, coming from behind, which is what happens. Often teams will morph their tactics as the race develops, as they see what the competition is like and the form they're in. And obviously today Lotto Soudal have changed their tactics slightly, which they're going to have to do because it hasn't worked so far.
And Mark Cavendish, as Brian was alluding to right at the end of the points that he was making, has had to reinvent himself to some extent. He doesn't rely on a big sprinters train. He's got two lead-out men, essentially, in the final who he can count on, and one in particular, Mark Renshaw, and their understanding seems to be back where it was, and it didn't work out so well for them last year, albeit for a different team, Ethics Quickstep, on the Tour de France. But this year, that intuitive understanding, that almost telepathic reading of a finish seems to be right back where it was.
Yeah, I think so, and I think, Mark Cavendish has got his right people around him. It's the guys that he's been working with for nearly 10 years, right from the beginning, Bernie Eisel and Mark Renshaw. And perhaps in the old days, they had a bunch of riders to support them. They're a bit more isolated now, but they've still got the same kind of working. They still work in exactly the same way, but now they're missing the 5 or 6 guys they used to have at their disposal to set them up. But because they've got so much experience together, they can still manage somehow to get the results, and that's a credit to them. And I think maybe that's what the other teams are seeing. They're seeing, well, look, Mark Cavendish is doing it with just 2 guys, maybe a third of Edvald Boasson as well, who's setting up. So, but that's a grand total of 3 guys for a lead out, which is tiny at this level. So, but if you do it perfectly, like you said, you read it well, and you've got the skill and the experience that those guys have, they can do it. They can hijack the other lead-outs.
Oh, certainly Brian Coquard doesn't benefit from a huge lead-out train either. He's got the likes of Antoine Duchesne doing a lot of work for him, but there's only 2 or 3 dedicated to working for Brian Coquard. Noticeably, Thomas Voeckler did some of the early work 2 days ago in terms of controlling the breakaway and bringing things back for the bunch sprint that so nearly ended in a victory for Coquard. Through the feed zone they go. Always a worrying moment or two as Musette feed bags are snatched. That's Ramanas Navadauskas from Cannondale Drapac, Lithuanian road race champion, just slinging his lunch over his shoulder, and then it's a question of just putting a hand in the back and seeing what your soigneur has packed into the musette, although that's preordained, isn't it? And every rider has their own sort of particular penchant for sweet or savoury, for whatever they want, really. Whatever makes them happy, that's what they get.
Yeah, the food will change in the musettes as the race goes on, and often you'll see like there's wrapped up a little sandwich or a cake, or sometimes even the thing for the last 10 years is actually a little rice cake, actual rice that's bonded together. But you kind of have to do that. You can't just be eating bars and gels the whole time, because you become completely sick of them, and so hence why they try and mix it up a bit and keep a bit of real food in there.
Actual food that tastes of food rather than just sugar. If you're worried, as many people are watching the Tour de France, might be the only bike race perhaps that you tune into every year, you watch the riders disposing of all the litter, which is basically what it is, the wrapping and bits and pieces that come out of the food bags. They do get... There is a zone in which they're allowed to jettison them by the side of the road, and there are people there who will sweep all that up and recycle it, hopefully, or certainly keep the countryside clean. And year after year, that becomes more of an established rule amongst the peloton as well.
Yeah, it has become. It was pretty
filthy back in the day. People just jettisoned their rubbish on the floor, but now it's only a recent development, maybe in the last 8 years, where it was the ASO that first did it, where they have the rubbish zones, and they have one just before the feed zone begins, and then one just after, which you'll see when you see these big red inflatable things, like I don't know how to describe them really, at the side of the road. That's where the zone is, the rubbish zone. We might see them in a bit, and then you've got one with 20 k's to go as well, I think, so you can get rid of your last bits of rubbish. Some jerseys even have little rubbish pockets in the side panel where you can just put it all in.
BMC on the front in the shape of the big man, Marcus Burkhardt. He's been on, well, countless editions of the Tour de France. Most famously, in many people's recollection, in 2007, right the way back then, 9 years ago, when he collided emphatically with a Labrador who jumped out from the side of the road. Do you remember that particular occasion? And Burkhardt catapulted over the dog, and the dog, staggeringly, came to no harm whatsoever.
Yeah, the dogs all seem to come out okay. The bike riders that get smashed up.
And still the soigneurs, the team carers, they double up as masseurs, of course, in the evening. They'll be working the tired legs. Stage 6 now. They stand by the side of the road and they're looking for their riders in the pack. All wearing team colours, that makes them identifiable. And through they go, incident-free, and that's good to see. BMC are wearing yellow helmets today. They take over the leadership of the team classification. That's why there's a change of outfit for them. They've got 4 riders at the front, and the yellow jersey has just slipped halfway down the pack. And those are the inflatables, I think you were talking about, the zone de collection, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, the recycling zone, essentially, and you can see everyone's chucking their rubbish by the side of the road. And you get a particular type of cycling fan as well who heads for this part of the race in the hope that they'll collect a water bottle, a little souvenir to take home. And there's a kid there who's just got that. Goodies dropped by the side of the road.
And there it is. It's only about, it's less than a kilometre long. It's probably 500 metres long, because that's where you see the second inflatables, and that's the zone ended. And they'll have ASO have staff in there that will now go and collect everything.
Yep.
It's amazing it took that long for the race to realise that was what was required, because there wasn't an option in the past. You either carried it or you threw it, and so it's yeah, it's been a good initiative actually. More races need to do it.
So it's another calm day. And all the GC contenders will be hoping it's just that. It has been a, relative to the last few editions of the Tour de France, a reasonably benign opening week. We're on stage 6. And in terms of the general classification, there wasn't really a full-blown race yesterday. And you're not expecting one today either.
No, and it's what Brian Holm was saying. It's like old cycling. This is what the Grand Tours used to be like. The first week used to be, we'll use the word pedestrian, but I'm sure the guys in there doesn't feel pedestrian, but that's what it appears like to us. It's got some sort of order to it, and I think everybody knows the last week's so hard, and there's very two strong GC teams. There's big sprinters, teams with big sprinters, so there is a certain order to it all at the moment.
Less than 100 kilometres to go. It is a little pedestrian at the moment, but towards the end, I can guarantee it won't be. Under 90 kilometres to go, and 3 minutes and 14 seconds for Arashiro and Jan Barter up front. The catch is not imminent. The chase will not be interested in getting across to them just now. Not even Andre Greipel and his Lotto Soudal boys. Yeah, a smile, a relaxed look from Andre Greipel, but still unfinished business on this edition of the Tour de France for the big German sprinter. Tore pieces into the Giro d'Italia back in May, when he went head-to-head with Marcel Kittel in a clash of the big German sprint men. Kittel won the first 2 sprint opportunities and then climbed off when the race got over from the Netherlands into Italy. And then Greipel came into his own, taking 3 stage wins and becoming the most successful racer in the history of German participation in the Giro d'Italia. But he wants to land a blow here on the Tour de France, and it's eluded him so far. His team are doing the work on the front in the distinctive shape of Lars Bak. One of the first men who do their shift at the front for Lotto Soudal before it gets handed over the baton to the likes of Jürgen Roelands to shepherd Andre Greipel into exactly the right position. And timing will be absolutely key, as it always is in a bunch sprint. But today's is a relatively uncomplicated, flat, wide and twisty-turny, but we're in a sort of gently direction switching way rather than tight corners. Nothing too much to worry the peloton in terms of the technical nature of today's running. So it's all about when your train does the work and picking the moment. At the moment, the three big sprinters who we've been talking about, Kittel, Cavendish and Greipel, they have one rider from each of those teams sharing the work at the front. But up the road, those two men are still to be caught. Jan Barter from the Czech Republic in his second breakaway, and a first appearance up the road for Yukiya Arashiro, a man formerly of Europcar, and the fourth Japanese rider ever to ride the Tour de France. And you'll be stunned, at least I was, to realise just how long ago it was since the first Japanese rider, and his name was Kiso Karamuro, took part in the Tour de France. When was it, David?
1926 was his first. He arrived in France in 1918 into Marseille to work in the nascent automobile industry, and had been a cyclist in Japan. Had done a few little races out there, and was based around Paris when he lived in France, and would go and help out with volunteers at bike race finishes. And after a few years, he plucked up the courage to actually start entering races himself. And in 1925, he got to a level where he thought that he could actually make the leap to actually doing it full time. And he did his first 300-kilometer race, Paris-Nancy, in 1926, I think it was, and then that gave him the courage to enter Tour de France for the first time, which is another story.
Well, it didn't go entirely according to plan. This is back in the days in the 1920s, of course, when the stages were so brutally long. I mean, 400 kilometres was not unusual, that they'd have to start the races at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he duly rolled out of the start town that year, which was, where was it? I was trying to find out. The finish line that day was in Mulhouse. It was in Evian, in the middle of France, and they rolled out at 2 o'clock in the morning, the finish line in Mulhouse, and he didn't make it. Basically, he abandoned on stage 1. But that wasn't the end of his Tour de France participation.
No, he came back the next year and did exactly the same thing. Started the first stage and managed not to finish it. But to be honest, I don't think I'd have been able to finish a 400-kilometre stage on the bikes they were riding on what were essentially dirt roads and cobbled roads. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think that there was a Japanese rider back then doing it. But there wasn't until many years later, the second.
Yeah. Karamuro was offered a couple of spare tubes by some spectators by the side of the road as they rolled out for the Grand Départ of the second edition, 1927. And apparently, anecdotally, he turned to the punter and said, "Yeah, just give me a couple. I don't think I'll be needing that many. I'm not expecting to get to Paris."
PMA, positive mental attitude.
Didn't happen. Eventually, he went back to Japan in the 1930s and passed away in 1973. And it was another 24 years after his death, and a full 70 years since he first took part in the Tour de France, that another Japanese rider came to the party, and that was Daisuke Imanaka in 1996. And that was a strange story as well. He climbed off, but he went as far as stage 14 in that particular edition of the race. His father was a wealthy executive for the Shimano company, and there was some acrimony during that race as well, and suggestions that Imanaka had been engaging in industrial espionage and taking photos of bikes during the Tour de France to feed back to his father as well. Unsubstantiated, I'm sure, allegations, but those were the rumours of the time. And then in 2009, well, Fumiyuki Beppu, another familiar name, I'm sure, to you if you've been watching the Tour de France over the last few years. For skilled Shimano back in those days, he came to the Tour de France, and so too did the man you're looking at now, Arashiro. And it's his 6th time on the Tour de France. Country that's yet to score a stage victory, and I don't think that Arashiro will be looking at a stage win today, the man. Nowadays riding for Lampe Merida, formerly of Europcar. And that is pretty much it. That's your history of Japanese participation in the Tour de France. It's coming down quite fast now, under 3 minutes, their advantage, 2:45 with 85.7k to go. Just to mark your card, there's one more climb to come today. They've already been over a Cat 3 and a Cat 4 climb, the breakaway riders. That's before we got live pictures. Jan Barter has taken 2 points on the road in the King of the Mountains competition, and Arashiro also has taken 2 points, so they've shared the honours up to this point. There's one more climb to come at 41.5 kilometres, and it's a Cat 3 climb, so there are 2 points available for the winner and 1 for second place, and that's over the Côte de Saint-Quentin-Noble-Val. And neither of these two riders are featuring really in the King of the Mountains competition. They've only got a couple of points to their name at this point. And the leader, after yesterday's breakaway, is Thomas de Gent for Lotto Soudal. Had a really hard day out in the breakaway yesterday. Fully committed to his second place, to that brilliant ride from Greg van Avermaet, and his legs will be hurting. That's a bit of a miss as well for Andre Greipel, because de Gent does a lot of the early work setting things up for him.
Yeah, but he did a good job yesterday, and that's, I think, we saw before that Lotto Soudal aren't taking control of the race just on their own as they have done in the earlier stages. I think they've handed off a bit, and this is what does happen. It starts to, the workload gets spread between the teams as the race goes on between the sprinters. There was Greipel obviously was very confident coming into the race, and that was displayed by how his team rode. This is Villefranche de Rouergue. Let me say it.
Go for it again, David.
I'm just going to say Villefranche de Rouergue. This is one of the Bastide towns, the walled cities. I didn't realise this. So 315 of these built beginning in the 13th century over a period of 150 years. All in this part of France as military zones. They walled them in, and each one of the 150 had very similar format. And they're French and British built. They're essentially has military bases where people could live, and the people that contribute to building these were given land outside the walls to farm and given their own rights. And it's quite interesting actually how this the Bastides were built, and it was part of the culture. Only 150 years that went on for, but 350 of the 15 of them built. So only in the southwest and this part of France.
La Collégiale Notre-Dame in Villefranche. I'm going to give it a go now. Villefranche de Rouergue.
Rouergue.
I have no idea.
Well,
you can repeat it back, but that was my best.
Rouergue.
Well, I don't know. You can practice at home while you look down at these wonderful terracotta roof tiles distinctive of this part of France, as we head to the deep, deep south of France, and the temperature has rocketed up again. Humid today, bright sunshine, and, well, must be in the low 30s today. Proper Tour de France weather, and a proper Tour de France bunch sprint. Our firm conviction and our expectation as we head into the département of the Tarn et Garonne, named after the two rivers that course through it. The Tarn River Valley. Some tough climbing around here as well. Today is a flat day, but it's not entirely flat countryside.
No, this part of France is very rolling, and probably the sapping part of it is not only the terrain as it is that normally when the Tour de France comes here, it is hot like this, and often when they get into the Pyrenees, as they will this weekend, it's hot and humid, and it's a lot more uncomfortable than it is when you get to the Alps, where it can often be hot, but it's much drier.
Tiny little glimpse of Chris Froome passing by in the company of the Astana team. Shouldn't be anything to worry about for Chris Froome today. There has been nothing to worry about for Chris Froome so far today. Not a day for the GC boys to come out to play, but very much a day for the sprinters, and they've got 82.9k to work out their game plans. BMC controlling the pace, along with Ethics Quickstep and Dimension Data and Lotto Soudal. 4 teams, just bit by bit, controlling and then reeling back in the 2 riders who have just under 81 kilometres to go now until they come to the finish line. I've just been working on a statistic which I'm confident about, if not 100% convinced that it's correct, David, but I think that there are 6 riders on the 3 sprinters stages, pure sprinters stages so far, who have finished top 10 in every stage, and 5 of them are not surprising. They are Peter Sagan, Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel, Andre Greipel. Oh no, Greipel hasn't actually, so there are 5, sorry. I'll go again. Peter Sagan, Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel and Brian Coquard. And I think the other one is Anne Clay.
It's an incredible statistic. We keep seeing him there. It's constantly in the 8th, 9th, 10th, which is for your first Tour de France is very impressive, because it takes those guys that are up there that are winning. That's a different level, which it might take him a couple more years to get to. But the fact he's already up there, positioning and doing everything else right, is a massive step forward. He's not just here, just finishing stages. He's up there amongst it. So if you're in the top 10, even 10th, that means you're really at the sharp end of the race.
Yeah, you're in that little group. I mean, sometimes the helicopter shot of a bunch of sprinters is very revealing, especially when it pans out further down and you see how the selection works. And there are always a little group of riders who just break off the front of the peloton. And to be in that mix and involved and on the same time, essentially, wheel for wheel with those guys means a big step up in class from the kind of races he's been competing in up till now.
Yeah, and he'll be learning so much. He'll be seeing how each team's riding, what the other sprinters are doing, and he's in the perfect position to be seeing all those big names and how they act and how they interact with their lead-out man, what positions they are when they launch their sprint. So if he's able to do that, I mean, obviously it's one thing sprinting and being there and getting your place, but hopefully he's able to be able to read what's going on, and he's learning something new every day.
Hey, you will be indeed. A product of the, much like yourself, David, of the...
Dave Rayner Fund. Yeah, there's a few riders in this race. There's Dan Martin, McClay, there's Yates, and on this side of the barriers is me. But yeah, it's a fund that we can see. It works. It gets riders up to the top level. And for those who didn't hear before when I was talking about it, it's something that runs in the UK to help road riders, primarily, almost completely road riders, but there are mountain bikes, etc. But it was created for road riders because we didn't have a national team to support back 20 years ago, and it was named after Dave Rayner, a British rider who was tragically killed. And in memory of him, they created this fund to help riders do what he had done, which was leave the UK to chase his dream of becoming a pro bike racer on the continent. And it's helped many of us, and it will continue to.
And they're quite rightly very proud of the fact that they have a 100% record in terms of top 10 finishes by former Dave Rayner Fund riders on this race so far, because either McClay or Martin have been top 10 in every stage so far.
It's a good stat.
It's not bad, is it?
Stat. Yeah.
100%. Every chance that'll happen again today. Be good to catch a glimpse of Dan McClay. He doesn't have a team that will move to the front and try and boss things and mix things up with the big sprinters lead-out trains. You don't see a great deal of him, but he does appear to make that final selection, and his reading of the race is obviously instinctive and getting better all the time as well. So what will McClay be able to do today? Certainly an outsider for a top 4, 5, maybe even better, who knows. You've been out on the course today and you've ridden the final few kilometres. David, what did you make of it?
It feels more like your classic Tour de France sprint finish. To be fair, up to now they've had very straight finishing kilometres on the first stage, and then there was only the second stage that I think stage 3 that Mark Cavendish won. There was a sweeping bend with 500 metres to go. But apart at the Kittel stage, again, that was a last K dead straight. So we have up to now today's a little bit more. There are a few more corners, but again, it's a big road and it's sweeping. There's a couple of sweeping left and rights in the last kilometre, which will stretch it out. And the sprinters teams will be aware that it's imperative. There's no jockeying around. It's not going to be like the sprint stage, the Kittel one. It's going to be a bit more of a classic lead out and position their riders. There's not going to be. You can't come from behind in this sprint.
Very relaxed looking Chris Froome in the company of Wout Poels, one of his main mountain lieutenants. And as you can see by the number of riders who are just pulling off to the side of the road for a comfort break, let's put it that way, there's no great urgency at the moment in bringing this back. They have the breakaway just where they want them. 1 minute and 53 seconds. It's absolutely nothing with 78.3 kilometres to go, so it's totally under control for now in the bunch. And the two riders up front will know that. The bunch sprint, we can all anticipate, will feature some of the fastest men they've ever been on the Tour de France: Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel and Andre Greipel. Those three riders will be analysed in tonight's highlights show at 7 p.m. when we hear from the directeur sportif who brought Mark Cavendish all that success back in the HTC Columbia years when he tore into this race and came away with 4, 5, 6 stage wins from a single edition on occasions. He's still part of Mark Cavendish's support team. He's in the team car working these days for Dimension Data, and that is Rolf Aldag. He's been talking to Daniel Friebe, and he's been talking about Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel and Andre Greipel. Their differing characteristics, their different strengths, and I guess also the weaknesses that their opponents might be able to exploit. The other thing that Daniel Friebe has been looking into and will be discussing in some detail on the highlights show tonight is this suggestion coming, I think, mainly from Dave Brailsford and Team Sky, amongst others. I'm sure he has plenty of support in the peloton for this notion, though, that for the general classification race, essentially, on flat days like this, the neutralised, what do you call it, the safety line, beyond which, if a mechanical or a crash comes into play, which is now 3 kilometres, should be extended right the way back to 5 kilometres. And there's some discussion about that on this edition of the Tour de France. And Daniel Friebe will be looking at that all in tonight's highlight show at 7 p.m.
It's an amazing story about this chateau. Queen Margot.
You've given it the big sell. This better be good. Yep.
She only spent 2 nights there in the 1500s. She was being pursued by the King of France, and there was then a revolt in the town, and she had to continue her escape. She was going to move to Agen, but the room she stayed in, they bricked it up and blocked the door, and it was only discovered in 1990 with all the furniture in there as it was from 500 years ago. So yeah, I like that story.
Wow, that would be something, wouldn't it? 500 years. Been locked up for 500 years.
They bricked it up in order to treasure it, and nobody knew about it until there was a big renovation in 1990.
Well, when I get home, I might go tapping the walls of my house at home to see if there's anything like that. I suspect there isn't, disappointingly. And we're on board with BMC wearing the yellow helmets that denotes that they are the best team at the moment in the team's competition, and they also have the yellow jersey. Greg Van Avermaet. There was some discussion after the stage yesterday. There is an assumption, and it is logical and true, that Greg Van Avermaet will lose the yellow jersey. Some discussion about when that might be. Might not be as early as tomorrow. He might be able to hang on to it tomorrow, but after that in the Pyrenees, surely he will lose it. But there was some discussion about whether or not the green jersey might be the next target that he looks at, and whether or not he might try and threaten Peter Sagan for his preeminence in that competition.
I personally don't think so, because I think his objective lies in the Olympic road race, which is a couple of weeks after the Tour de France, and for him to pursue the green jersey would require expending a massive amount of energy and risk exhausting him. It's not something that he's chased before, and it's a competition that's very particular, and as we've seen, it is dominated by Peter Sagan. And to go head-to-head with Peter Sagan, I don't think Greg Van Avermaet would even attempt that, to be honest, because he can't compete against him in the big flat sprints like today, and he could compete against him in the hilly stages and chase the point, but that's futile when he's already going to lose the points in stages like this, so I don't think so. The yellow jersey, on the other hand, I mean, he's got 5 minutes on second place, and tomorrow it's just one. I mean, it's a big climb to the finish, but if the fitness he showed yesterday, I don't see why he wouldn't fight and try and keep it. It's within the realms of possibility. If the peloton is still together at the bottom of that last mountain, that he could limit his losses and perhaps just scrape it. But equally, it was a massive day yesterday, and this is going to be a pretty new and strange experience for him. He might find himself just completely exhausted tomorrow, and I don't know, but it could go either way, but he stands a very slim chance of keeping it. Normally we'd say immediately gruppetto, but after what he did yesterday, you never know.
My suspicion is he'll try his hardest, at least in the early stage, to hang on to it. If he does feel like it's an impossibility, maybe he'll conserve his energy and sit up. But it's one of the great sights on the Tour when a rider gets himself a surprise yellow jersey and hangs on to it.
And this is the rider that would take the yellow jersey. We'd anticipate, because he lies in second overall out of Philippe at 5 minutes 11 seconds, and he's definitely a better climber than Greg Van Avermaet. But that's not to say. We saw him actually. Alaphilippe was on that group of 23 riders that was at the front of the race, left the remnants of the peloton. He was one of the last guys in that group. He did look like he was fairly swinging and suffering, but it could have been that he was just on a bad day. It's up to him and his team tomorrow to try and shake Van Avermaet to try and put him in that jersey, because these opportunities don't come very often. Even Greg Van Avermaet said yesterday getting yellow was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and that's very much the truth. For many riders, it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and it shouldn't be wasted.
Bathed in warm sunshine down here in the Tarn-et-Garonne, and yet another chateau looming into view. This one absolutely pristine and beautifully restored as well.
I'm afraid I don't have any really good story about this one.
Well, we'll absorb our disappointment there and just enjoy the sight of it instead. Yeah, it was a fascinating stage yesterday, and it did ask some interesting questions. especially with Astana as well, and Vincenzo Nibali. That was the surprise move of the day, really, wasn't it? Nibali going backwards. He was the only big GC name to lose out yesterday. And it almost looked deliberate. It almost looked calculated. From a man who's won the Giro d'Italia this year, is coming not as the main man into Astana, probably looks at the opposition and thinks, well, even at best, a podium would be the very limit of my ambitions here, or my capabilities, or my possibilities. Do I really want that, or would I prefer just to go on the hunt for a stage win on the odd occasion? And maybe, just maybe, Vincenzo Nibali was doing that deliberately, losing time in the general classification to allow himself the freedom to do that and get up the road.
Yeah, I think so. Now he hasn't got any obligations. I mean, in theory, he's got the obligation to help his team leader now, Fabio Aru, but that's very much at the discretion of Vincenzo Nibali. He's probably not going to feel that as an obligation in the slightest. But I think very much like Greg van Avermaet and a few other races here, his primary objective will be the Olympic road race after this. So now he can choose the occasional day, and like you said, chase a stage win, which is 100% possible for him, a rider of his class and racing pedigree. But at the same time, I think we'll see also a masterclass in preparation for the race that probably means more to him than anything at the moment, which is the Olympic road race.
Well, if anyone fancies collecting a Team Sky bidon water bottle, there's one just there. It was flung over the parapet into the field, and there it is. I'm sure some fans will be scavenging around trying to pick up a few souvenirs. We're looking at the yellow jersey of Greg van Avermaet, which is just about the best souvenir that any bike racer can take away from this great race. 73.5 kilometres to go, 2 minutes and 5 seconds to gap. Arashiro and Bata continue out front. They've got 2 minutes, which is pretty much what they've had for the last 20-30 kilometres. The peloton just letting them dangle out there on these long straight roads at this point in the race on the approach to Mont-Auban. That's where we're heading. There's one Category 3 climb to come en route before we get there. It's actually 3.2 kilometres in length and just over 5%, so it's not nothing, even though it's a Category 3 climb. And they start to go over that at 44.7k to go, and going over the top at 41.5 kilometres to go. Now, ordinarily, David, on a flat stage with a categorised climb late on, you might be talking in terms of, well, is that a danger for Mark Cavendish? Is that something he needs to be aware of? Is that an opportunity for an opportunist rider to get away and spring a surprise on everyone? But, well, 41.5k to go, that would be a forlorn hope if anyone tried that.
Yeah, no, at this point in the race, it would be a bit of a waste of time. I mean, a break could go, but when you're planning an attack like that, you do take into account all the variables. And your first variable to take into account today is who wants to win. And we can see that Mark Cavendish wants to win, Andre Greipel wants to win, Marcel Kittel, Brian Coquard, William Coquard. That's four individuals with four powerful teams who are going to try and shut down everything that goes. So it would really be an exercise in futility to go then, because you'd just be hanging yourself out to dry. You're better to save that if you're that type of rider that excels in that punchy terrain, you wait until a day where you think a break can make it to the finish, and that means you'll probably have to try and get in the break in the first hour, at which point there'll be lots of other riders similar to you that want to do that. And you'd only do that if you'd already taken into account that first variable of the sprinters teams don't want to control this today. So it's kind of the race ends up neutralising itself, because riders weigh up their options, and it's a bit like game theory, and they figure out, well, what works for me, what's going to work and what isn't. And today that simply wouldn't work, so it's a waste of time.
Is the damning verdict from David Miller a waste of time? Not a waste of time for Jan Bata. He's showing off his team colours for the second time on this Tour de France, having been up the road on stage 1 with Paul Voss on that particular occasion. Paul Voss, his teammate, got himself the King of the Mountains jersey at the end of that stage as well. To go through the Département du Tarn et Garonne. That's where we're heading. That is the département in which the race finishes today. Orica Bike Exchange have got most of their riders, or half of them at least, including Adam Yates with 209 on his back, the rear of the peloton, and just in front of them a glimpse of Dan McClay, the British sprinter with 3 top 10s so far on the Tour de France to his credit. One of only 5 riders to have scored a top 10 finish on each of the 3 occasions for the sprinters on this edition of the Tour. So he's having a great debut. As we look down at the Abbey of Notre-Dame-Beaulieu-en-Rouergue, which I've slightly altered my pronunciation of, just hedging my bet slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic round here. Quite a lot of British holiday makers I've noticed as well, enjoying the sunshine, getting away from it all back home. Believe it or not, for all the trials and tribulations back home and the hand-wringing, France is still France. The Tour de France is still the great event it ever was, and the welcome is just as warm. As is the weather today, really hot and humid. Tour de France this year is, at the moment anyway, struggling a little bit to punch its weight in terms of domestic coverage, and that's because the French football team are doing so well. They're in action tonight down in the south, in Marseille, where they take on their old rivals and foes, Germany. So it's France versus Germany in the football tonight. And last time we had a bunch sprint, it was France versus Germany too, and that was pretty close. Brian and Marcel Kittel separated by just 28 millimetres.
I'm sure the only French in France who'd be reasonably happy or wouldn't show it still would be the organisers of the Tour de France, because if France were knocked out, that would put the limelight back on the Tour de France.
Restore the natural order of things. It is interesting when football and cycling don't really, the Venn diagrams don't overlap too much. And but the football, undeniably, and you'd be a fool to deny it, is a huge story in France. And when the national team does really well, of course, that takes up a lot of attention. Julien Alaphilippe, Matt Rendell reports to me, the man wearing the white jersey for Ethics Quickstep today, was doing his rounds of interviews in what we call the mixed zone, where he talks to all the press and the television cameras yesterday. That's his duty to do that, being a jersey wearer. But he got rather fed up with the incessant questioning, mostly from the French media, about the football. And eventually, rather politely, having dealt with it on a handful of occasions, he said, look, honestly, does anyone want to ask me about the cycling? Because I'm not interested in the football. And he kind of walked away with a smile. Posing for selfies with lots of spectators on the way out. He's a superstar. They love him. Julien Alaphilippe.
Yeah, he's one of that, the new wave of French young cyclists. That they haven't had that in a couple of decades for sure. So I think it's Alaphilippe, Romain Bardet, Thibaut Pinot, and Brian Coquard. They're four riders, and all have slightly different styles as well. So it's
yeah, not to mention Warren Barguil as well.
And Warren Barguil, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bought for 12 francs during the French Revolution, this castle, which
predating the Euro by some distance. Chateau de Najac. The helicopter pilots are enjoying themselves out here today. Perfect still conditions, clear blue skies, and absolutely wonderful footage to enjoy. Just gets better and better what French television are able to do with this race. Ever since they found a way of stabilising the cameras on the helicopters, a good few years ago now, 10 years ago, these gyroscopic systems that keep that shot as stable as it is, as if it was on a tripod.
I don't know if this is, because we hear about the Cathars. This is the Cathar region of France, which was at the beginning, around the 1200s, was when they were being persecuted. And that castle was built to intimidate the local population. It's a medieval military architecture at its best, apparently. But this whole area around here, and Toulouse and going to Catalonia, was where the Cathars were all persecuted and essentially ended up being destroyed by the French king and the Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church waging a war against what was essentially a religious sect that didn't fit in their doctrine, and
no, exactly.
They were wiped out. Back on the road, 150. Back to Daniel Tekla-Heimanot, the Eritrean road race champion. Former King of the Mountains wearer, jersey wearer on the Tour de France, and there's Thomas Voeckler trying to set things up for Brian Coquard. He's doing the early shift now, the very early shift with 65.7k. Just making sure that Coquard is represented, and so too are the team at the front. It's interesting to see Voeckler on domestique duty for that team. Don't think I've seen it before. Occasionally, I suppose he used to do work for Pierre Roland in the mountains when Roland was looking for hunting down a stage win, or riding high in GC in the past, or hunting down King of the Mountains points. But normally, Vöckler's been in the race essentially in the nicest possible way, in the most positive sense for himself.
No, exactly, and it's very much when we had Dave Brailsford in here a few days ago, he was talking about the natural curve of a professional cyclist career, the ascent, the plateau, the descent, and when you're kind of coming down the other side, you start doing the jobs that you did at the beginning, but in a slightly different way. So he has gone full circle back doing domestique work, but he can choose when he does it, contrary to the beginning of his career when he was told when to do it. And we often see that with the older riders. It happens to me as well. You get to a point where you're no longer the rider that the leader who is counted on to win. You become the rider who's got the tactical knowledge and can read the race and is still strong enough to do work, but just hasn't got that little X factor anymore to win bike races. Although Thomas Vöckler did win Tour of Yorkshire and he's still a great bike racer on his day, but there's just not quite as often as they once were.
Yeah, Tour de Yorkshire demonstrated that Vöckler is on blistering form still when he wants to. And what he lacks, what the legs perhaps lack, as he heads towards his late 30s, the cycling brain makes up for, and his reading of a race is almost second to none. These two men were built for breakaways. Arashiro features regularly in breakaways, not just on the Tour de France, but in most stage races. And Jan Barta is perfect for a breakaway, the 4-time and reigning Czech time trial champion. And he's been the road race champion of the Czech Republic as well, back in 2013. He's a good time trialist though. Came 11th in the World Championships last year in Richmond. And that was over very hilly terrain. And, more recently than that, in the individual time trial at the Bayern-Rundfahrt, the Tour of Bavaria, he came in 3rd place in a time trial won by Alex Dowsett on the day. Dowsett, one of the British riders who isn't represented at the Tour de France, much to his disappointment. The Movistar rider was on the shortlist actually to make the team, but didn't make the final selection. And possibly that's because Nairo Quintana just needs to pack his team with climbing talent.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Alex Dowsett is a fantastic bike rider and is amazing. He's an amazing time trialist. We've seen he's won his 5th, or it wasn't even his 6th, national time trial championship this year. And he's also held the hour record, and so we know he's strong, and he's Commonwealth champion as well in the time trial. So, but I think for the Tour de France this year, perhaps they require more climbing domestiques, as we saw yesterday. I mean, they still had a full complement of team. They had 8 riders, 9 riders even, when they got Peloton down to 40. Now, I'm not even sure if Alex Dowsett would be able to do that and be there, which is nothing against Alex, but they need riders in this race this year to be able to help Nairo Quintana in the mountains, which is where they need to do the damage.
Yeah, and those opportunities to ride for himself, had he been selected in the individual time trials, might not have suited Alex Dowsett. Well, certainly one of them wouldn't have suited him, since it's essentially a mountain time trial, goes straight uphill. The second individual time trial, even the first one though, features a fair amount of climbing and probably wouldn't have been greatly to his taste. So there would have been limited scope for Dowsett to compete for a stage win, and so he's missed out on this edition. But every edition of the Tour de France is different, and that's part of its fascination.
No, exactly. If there'd been a team time trial in the first week this year, no doubt they'd have brought Alex Dowsett, because he could have made a key difference in that. So the teams are always chosen that suit the terrain and the tactics and the leader that each team has. Although there's very few teams that have the depth to pick and choose. Most teams, they just take their best 9 riders. There's few teams like Movistar or Team Sky where the guys they leave at home could almost be a Tour de France team themselves, and which is mighty impressive, but all the more difficult for the direction of the team to choose who's going to ride it, and also very difficult then to be part of that team. We see with Team Sky, they're all on altitude camps 3 months out. There's the commitment to being part of that Tour de France team. That's almost the first win. Making it onto the qualifying to be on the team is a massive result as when you're on a team like that.
Sylvain Chavanel, the rider from Direct Energie, just alongside the yellow jersey of Greg Van Avermaet. And yellow jersey, who we saw further back down the pack towards the rear end of the peloton, has moved himself up now into about 6th wheel as Daniel Tekla-Heimanot continues to do a long shift on the front. Orica Bike Exchange. Well, we saw Michael Matthews competing for the intermediate sprint. getting himself a few useful points in the green jersey competition, so he's clearly not decided that's going to be Peter Sagan's and it's not even worth competing. Matthews wants to keep his name in the frame in the green jersey competition here. A rider who we understand will be on the move, Michael Matthews, leaving Orica Bike Exchange, and we believe that'll be Giant Alpecin that he'll be heading to, probably to replace John Degenkolb, who we understand also will most likely be on the move away from that team. Don't think Andre Greipel's going anywhere though. He seems happier than ever at Lotto Soudal and pretty much in the form of his life. Had a great season so far, even if his Tour de France hasn't quite caught fire just yet. Massive frame. Look at those legs, David. How'd you get legs like that?
I don't know.
You never did?
No. Mine looks like his arms.
Just so ridiculous, that physique. Made for sprinting. But the amazing thing about Greipel is, even on lumpy stages, over climbs, on all sorts of terrain, he can deliver.
Yeah, it is amazing sometimes when you get to the finish in a race and you find out that Greipel's won and you were dropped 30 k's before. And that I've seen him win races where there's only 30 left. And the same with Mark Cavendish, that's what I talked about before. Some of these sprinters, you would be amazed at how well they can climb.
OK, 15k before they climb over the last Cat 3 of the day. They've got a 1:47 advantage. Welcome back. 56.5 kilometres to go, and France, bathed in sunshine, continues just to show off, frankly. The Gorges d'Aveyron, the Aveyron Gorges here, as that river cuts through this landscape. Millions of years old, cutting a swathe through this part of the countryside. 250 kilometres long, the Aveyron River. Starts off in the Massif Central, where it has its source, flows out through the town of Rodez, where last year Greg Van Avermaet beat Peter Sagan to a stage finish, to take his first stage finish yesterday. The yellow jersey, last year I should say, the yellow jersey picking up his second stage yesterday. And that river flows out into the River Tarn, just to the northwest of Montauban, where today's stage finishes. 1:49 the advantage, 1:52 just been corrected, so not much has changed since we've joined live coverage. Just in time to see an intermediate sprint that was pretty furiously contested between Marcel Kittel and Brian Coquard in particular, with other riders also like Michael Matthews and Peter Sagan competing for the minor honours. The only noticeable absentee there was Andre Greipel. Didn't seem bothered at all in trying to get himself green jersey points there, and Mark Cavendish was a little bit less than interested, just rolling over in 6th place in that sprint, so 8th overall with the 2 breakaway riders further up the road, but 6th in the big battle between those sprinters at the intermediate sprint of the day. It's a record-breaking day today, David Miller, on the Tour de France.
Yeah, it's the longest the Tour de France has gone without an abandon. I'm trying to look if that's ever or not, so somebody will tell me, but it's very rare that this sort of happens in any stage race, and let alone the Tour de France, where it's renowned for its crashes and abandons, and we've already heard riders complaining about how dangerous it is and safety concerned, as you mentioned before, about changing the 3-kilometre rule to 5-kilometre. And yet, ironically, there's not been one abandon yet. So it's quite sort of
sorry,
a bit confusing
my
now.
eyes slightly caught by that battle going on in the turrets there. Yeah. No, it's remarkable. 198 riders at the start at Mont Saint-Michel, and here we are right down in the southwest, heading towards the Pyrenees, and they're still all there. Come mighty close to a few abandons, though, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, and we've seen some crashes. But actually, if we look at the routes this year, it's actually been, by modern Tour de France standards, relatively safe. We've had reasonably straight stages, and I know that sounds strange, but often they're zigzagging around on local roads and have quite odd finishing sort of deviations, and yet this year the run-ins have been very safe, and that's a credit to the organisers, who perhaps have seen in the past that it has been just far too dangerous in the final. And they're on mainly national roads, big roads, and big safe run-ins. And even today, although by the standards of the last few stages it's a little bit more technical, it's still far from being what we would consider to be a technical finish. It's simply got a few curves in it on a big road. And that all helps, I think. I mean, I think that's helped massively.
And there's the man responsible for it all. On the left-hand side of the passenger seats there, in the rear of the car. And he's joined by the Danish Prime Minister as well, Lars Løkke Rasmussen. Christian Prudhomme is the man deep in conversation with the Danish Premier. And he's left his mark on this race in the short time. Well, it's not that short, is it, for heaven's sake, but in the history of the Tour de France, it's a relatively short time he's been in charge. The race directors tend to hang around for decades sometimes, and Prudhomme has ushered in a new era. But this is not a very Prudhomme-like course so far. He favours a few more stings and twists and difficulties in the opening week, and certainly that's been the pattern over the last few years. Cobblestones, most notably. But also the weather's been kind on this edition. We've had very little rain, just that stage 2 where it was kind of drizzly for most of the day, and there was the expectation of really serious crosswinds on those opening 2 stages on the Cherbourg Peninsula, and that didn't really materialise either, so it's all played in favour of the Peloton, and that's the reason why 198 riders are still in the race.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been quite enjoyable for them so far, and we've seen relatively easy racing. It's not been flat out ripping. Even yesterday, although it was very hard, I mean, we saw how it was ripped to pieces. It wasn't aggressive racing from the off. It was sort of built up to it.
Yeah, and that group of GC favourites ultimately was quite big. A 23-man group containing virtually all, with the exception of Vincenzo Nibali and Tom Dumoulin, virtually all the big players were in there, and even some of the minor players who still harbour GC ambitions and might be thinking about a top 10. They were all able to live with the pace being set by Movistar, the likes of Quintana and Chris Froome as well. So whilst it was hard, it wasn't furious and it wasn't ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, the riders who have suffered big time to stay in the race, haven't they? One thinks of Alberto Contador, once again losing time, and simply through pain, the pain in his body that still hampers him, causing him in relatively acute circumstances yesterday, totally un-Contador-like, to lose yet more time in the GC, and it's gone essentially now, hasn't it? Any hopes he might have had?
No, it's not looking good, and I think in a way we've really been able to see for the first time the sort of damage that a crash can do. Of course, it damages, but often riders just get back up and carry on and appear to shake it off quite quickly. But we've seen Morku and Bennett, who were in that first crash on the first day, and they've been the first 2 dropped almost every day, and they've been switching places of being the last man to finish each day. And I think that just goes to show kind of what the impact it does. Even if you don't break a bone, it can really affect you massively, and there's nothing worse than having that happen at the beginning of the race, like it's happened to Alberto Contador, Morku and Bennett, because it's going to be difficult for them to come out of that now. There's a chance that if they get to the rest day, then maybe they can reset and hopefully get themselves back on the right track, but it's going to be hard for any of those guys to get back to where they need to be in order to stand a chance of getting a result.
Can happen though, can't it? I remember the 2013 edition of the Tour de France, in the early stages of which Geraint Thomas fell and fractured his pelvis, and he was in agony for what, the next 10 days before slowly it started to get a little bit better. And the reason he stayed in the race was because towards the back end of that particular edition, won by Chris Froome, he was very valuable and he was needed, and his struggles ultimately were worth it.
Yeah, and it's that sense of duty, I think. I mean, there's always different motivations for staying in, but the Tour de France is one of the very few races on the calendar where finishing is so important. And there's other races, if you were that injured, you'd stop. You would. I mean, that would everybody would accept that, and it would be considered completely acceptable. But at the Tour de France, nobody wants to stop, and the team doctors and the team directors, they won't say anything. They almost kind of they step around the subject, not wanting to influence you, knowing how important it is. And often, as a rider's injured, you just want somebody to tell you to stop and almost order you to, because you know you won't. And you know, that's probably a good thing, because I've been in that situation, and although I've hated everybody during it and been miserable and come out of it.
You're great company, were you?
Yeah, it's so much fun. But then you come out of it and you realise how important it was to make it to the finish, and it's probably one of those the last sporting events at a professional level where finishing can be as important as winning.
It's in the nature of this cycling calendar to be a bit confusing, and if you don't follow cycling necessarily all through the year, and don't forget it runs from, well, nowadays pretty much early January all the way through to November when they carry on racing in the Far East. The complication of cycling is that there aren't many races on the calendar apart from the monuments and the one-day classics and the Tour de France where it's all in. You know, you're not eyeing up necessarily, although even with the Tour de France, occasionally riders are thinking about the Olympics in an Olympic cycle. But fundamentally, it's all in. And so often in other races of less significance and importance, you're thinking about the next big target to come.
They're a means to an end, and that end normally is the Tour de France or one of the classics. It's they're the really big objectives, and nobody goes to use those as training races. Now, a couple of big riders can come to the Tour de France, like you said, if it's an Olympic cycle, and use it to get ready for that. But very few riders have the... Nobody comes to Tour de France to use it as a training preparation race, apart from
Vincenzo Nibali. Yeah, I mean, no, we mentioned his name before. That might well be, again, I mean, we talked about him losing time yesterday and thinking about stage wins, but the Olympic road race would be a big incentive for Vincenzo Nibali this year, and a seriously realistic target for him as well. The Italians know how to race that particular race so well.
Yeah, it suits him perfectly. We've seen at the World Championships perform excellently in races like Liège, and this essentially, from what we know of the Olympic road race course, it's quite similar to a mountain stage in a Grand Tour, only with mixed bits of a classic, some cobbles and some very steep sections. So, and the fact it's on circuits, so it's a race a style of race that the riders won't be accustomed to, and so it's a bit of a journey into the unknown for all of them. But from what everyone's talking about, we're likely to see that the guys who are at the front in the GC in the Tour de France are likely to be the guys who will be at the front in the Olympics road race.
1 minute and 25 is the advantage we're hearing on race radio, so slightly more than the graphic on screen would suggest at the moment. BMC with Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen just sit in behind a mixture of teams representing all the big sprinting hopes. Thomas Voeckler for Brian Coquard and Daniel Tekla-Heimanot working for Mark Cavendish. 2 stage wins for Cav so far on this edition of the Tour de France. Will it be 3? 48 kilometres, we'll know. .44 kilometres to go, and they are starting to climb. The bunch being led by Thomas Voeckler for Direct Énergie up the Côte de Saint-Antonin-Nobleval, the last categorised climb of the day, a Category 3 climb, 3.2 kilometres in length at an average gradient of 5.1%. They go over the top at 41.5 kilometres to go, and the lead 2 riders still have 1 minute and 11 seconds advantage. Jan Barter and Arashiro from Lampe Merida. There's not much they can do here, isn't there, David? I mean, it's a forlorn hope. It is one of those, you'd hate to say it, but really rather routine breakaways. There wasn't any possibility of either of these riders scooping up enough mountain points to take the jersey. They don't feature in the intermediate sprints competition. There's no chance of them staying away. It is kind of ticking a box today for these two.
A little bit, yeah. Perhaps when they went, they hoped more riders would go with them to allow them to the slim possibility of it making it to the finish line. But as it stands, it's turned into more of the sort of procession-like breakaway. But it's like we said, Bora have been in every breakaway apart from one in this race so far. That's clearly their tactic, is just to be present and to make sure that they're seen.
Yeah, and their riders are in an interesting place at the moment, aren't they? Because there are all these rumours going around that Bora is going to get a massive injection of budget, hence the reason they've been linked so heavily with Peter Sagan, and a move for, that doesn't come cheap for a start. And so a lot of the riders, I suppose Barter is one of their more influential and important riders, but a lot of them will be thinking about their contracts and their futures on a team that is ambitious. And every time that happens, don't forget that Bora Argon themselves were born of a British hybrid team with NetApp, which is a German team. They joined forces with Endura, and a lot of the British riders, when they took the next step up, lost their jobs. And so it's always tricky for riders on teams with ambitions.
Yeah, and in particular this year, because from what I've heard, there's over 100 cyclists in the World Tour who haven't got contracts for next year yet. So this is a bit of a shop window for those guys that haven't got contracts. Get out there and show that they just get their name out there, and over time, hopefully, that will give them a little bit more influence when it comes to negotiations. But yeah, I mean, as you said, if Peter Sagan comes to your team, that changes. He's one of the few riders that would change the whole dynamic of the team, because no doubt he comes with 3 or 4 riders. He'll come with requirements for which race he's going to, and every time he goes to a race, the whole team will be based around him. So yeah, it does change things, and all the riders in that team will be aware of that and be waiting to find out if he's coming or not and what that means for their future.
197 riders sitting down in the saddle and only one standing up at that point when we joined the front of the race, and that man was Thomas Voeckler for Direct Energie. 1.7k to go for Arashiro and Barta to the top of this climb. And it's tough. It's a tough climb, especially when it's being raced as hard as this. And for the breakaway, they're just going to hang on. They've been out there pretty much all day, 190.5 kilometres, and once again a breakaway went very quickly today, which has also been a feature of the opening week of the Tour de France. There's Voeckler. Lars back behind him. Slight changing of the guard with Ethics Quickstep, who normally rely on Ilio Kaiser and Julien Vermont to do the early work. Well, today it's the young Czech talent Petr Vakoč in third wheel there in the blue and black with the white helmet. That is Vakoč, so he's doing the work for them. Early on, Daniel Tekla-Hymanot for Mark Cavendish's team, Eritrean national road race and time trial champion, did the double this year at the Nationals just before the Tour de France. It's one of the great features of this part of the cycling calendar that the national championships in continental Europe and in Africa happen just before the Tour de France, so there's always a changing of the guard with the jerseys, and the likes of us, humble commentators, have to get used to who's wearing what jersey, all from scratch again, having been used to them for the previous year. It all changes as well, and it's a huge honour to take that jersey onto the Tour de France as well. Means an awful lot. Yeah,
I mean, it is. It's I think every cyclist would love to wear their national champions jersey, because it's often when you're a professional cyclist, you're very much, you lose your identity. You're at the whim of the team you're on and the sponsors. Now, if you win your national champions jersey, it gives you your own identity, and it allows you to reconnect with your home country. And it's one of those strange phenomenon as well that I don't really know the tradition behind it, but yeah, as you said, it's the weekend that precedes the Tour de France when all the national championships take place, apart the Australian, which happens in January, and the Americans who do theirs in May. But every other country, almost every other country, has it that Sunday before. So if you win it, you're on a Tour de France team, you get to wear it for the first time at the Tour de France.
Something that you did. I do remember it happening, and I'm just struggling to remember which year it might have been, so I'm going to guess.
2007.
Seven. That was close.
Yeah.
Sonia Duval?
Sonia Duval, yeah.
Yeah. But now, what did that look like? The British national champions jersey in a Sonia Duval sort of hybrid at the time, because their kit was famously Sonia Duvalish.
Famously, yeah, yellow and ugly.
Yeah.
No, it was okay. I got my first, when I was with Sonia Duval, I went for the traditional black shorts, which I thought kind of that's the traditional thing to do. But then the next year when I was with Slipstream, they made me have white shorts, which was the slightly, not so good. I don't know, some people. I'm sure that Adam Blythe, who's a national champion this year, will be in full white.
Well, we've got a bit of a bike race here towards the top end of this final Category 3 climb. Jan Barta has decided to attack Arashiro. The first Cat 3 climb of the day, right back with 128.5 kilometres to go. The Col des Estacs was won by Barta, and he wins this one too. So he gets himself a further 2 points in the mountains competition, and Arashiro picks up just one. So Barta has got 4 points on the road today in the King of the Mountains competition, which moves him up the standings, and another day out in a breakaway might well see him become a player in the King of the Mountains competition. He's on 4 points now in 5th place in that competition. Thomas de Gent will continue in the polka dot jersey tomorrow, leading the way with 13 points, and that is a remarkable place for a game of chess, was it?
With the bikes.
How do they get there?
I don't know.
And
I feel like they should be wearing helmets.
That is extraordinary.
And ropes.
That's frightening me to look at. Well, further back down the road, 46 seconds further back down. Voeckler, with a little hand signal there, takes the peloton through. Snatches a water bottle, flanked by all the big players of the of the hour, of the stage, the sprinters teams who are interested, and the team of BMC who are looking after today's new yellow jersey, Greg van Avermaet. 40.7 kilometres remaining on the road to Montauban. Little glimpse of Team Sky. Chris Froome just tucking in behind Mikel Landa. And there's their game of chess. I'm still struggling to get my head around that. I wonder if they knew they were going to be featured on global television coverage. Well, that wave would suggest he knows exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
Who's winning the chess, David? Analyse that.
Yeah.
I'd favour the black figures from here. But she's got him pretty much where she wants him.
I think it's a boy in the hat.
That too. There are plenty of mysteries about that particular game of chess that we might never ever get to the bottom of. So confirmation of the result. Jan Bata getting the better of Arashiro over the last climb of the day. Now it is pretty much downhill all the way to Montauban, rolling. But they're heading out of the hillier territory and down towards the river valleys. So it'll only go up. It's been a fairly moderate pace, and they're going to come in a little bit down on the slow schedule, I think, by the time they get to the finish line today. But it's going to get faster. Less than an hour of racing now, 47 seconds. And the catch, well, they might leave them out there for the next 20 kilometres. It could only happen at 10k to go. Who knows, though? They might get it wrong. And sometimes the peloton develops almost like a dynamic of its own that it doesn't itself totally understand, and a team will urge another team on, and then it develops a dynamic that then becomes unstoppable, and the catch happens too early.
No, exactly. In this situation here, you could find your teams positioning their sprinters, or the GC teams positioning their leaders, and you end up with having that sort of drag race at the front, which just builds the momentum as they're trying to hold their position. They start accelerating, and that will just suck that breakaway in without it being a deliberate chase. That's just from the positioning at the front can then increase the speed so much.
You can tell by the body language with Bata and Arashiro, the nodding of the head, the slight unease in the saddle. Their upper body's a little bit less locked on and rigid as they were in the more relaxed phase of this race. That this is beginning to tell now. This has been a long day out, and now if they want to stay away and survive, they're going to have to just produce a little bit more wattage and keep it high, keep the pedals turning over. And it gets tougher and tougher with each passing kilometre. And a glance anxiously now from Arashiro, trying to see if he can actually catch a sight of the peloton. The roads here are very straight.
Yeah, in a few Ks, in about 10 Ks, they'll be on very long dead straights where none of the breakaway will be able to glance behind and see the peloton coming, and similarly the peloton will just be able to lock in on them and control it. And then we'll see the gap's gone up a little bit, but as you can see behind, it's very relaxed. There's Rohan Dennis on the front now for BMC. Interesting that BMC are still riding. They don't really need to, unless it's simply for positioning. But it's really up to the sprinters teams now. I think BMC will have controlled the first half of the race, but now they should just be saving all the energy they have for tomorrow and the upcoming days, because obviously when Greg van Avermaet's out the jersey, they're then back onto duty for Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen.
Brian Cockard's team are being extremely visible at the moment. We saw Thomas Voeckler on the front, but those yellow bikes and this black and yellow kit are all over the front. The only sprinters team really represented with big numbers at the front, which is an expression of confidence in their young French sprinter.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I think the fact he came so close to winning that stage, Marcel Kittel, I think he's and his team have done a fantastic job that day as well. They've been riding hard at the front. They positioned him well, and I think it's given them a real new motivation and belief in themselves.
Do you think today's finish will suit Brian Cockard slightly less well than that long uphill drag in which he almost beat Marcel Kittel the other day?
I think, I mean, yeah, you would have said that today really does suit the pure. I mean, Brian Cockard is obviously a pure sprinter, but against Marcel Kittel and Andre Greipel and Mark Cavendish, who have these incredible lead outs and the experience, he's going to be more in a position where he's having to react to them rather than force it. His team will be able to get him in a good position, but they'll be hard pushed to match the lead out trains of those big sprinters teams, which will sadly put him in a bit on the back foot.
Well, they've got themselves 106 now. It had been coming down to 46 seconds, so they've been given, essentially, and they've fought themselves another 20 seconds. So they'll be out there a fair while longer. 36.9k to go. And as David just said, the roads, after a few more twists and turns, become very, very straight, with only a couple of slight changes in direction before they enter the outskirts of Montauban, succession of little villages, and then they go over the main A20 motorway, and then they hit Montauban itself. And then it's sweeping turns all the way to the finish line on big, wide roads. Lightning fast it's going to be. The last time Jan Barter got himself in a breakaway, it was Paul Voss who stole the honours, really, for Bora Argonne. He was very much in a support role on that particular occasion. That was on stage 1. You might remember him from the 2014 Tour de France as well, Jan Barter. That was also a two-man breakaway on stage 3 from Cambridge into London. And Barter was the best man in that particular breakaway and the last man standing. And he was on the podium that day on the Mall in London in 2014, winning the Prix de la Combativité, as I recall, presented to him by Jose Mourinho. Might have got that wrong. He was certainly there on the day.
I think you're right, yeah.
And there's the King of the Mountains. Thomas de Gent made absolutely...
embracing the polka dots.
He is, yeah, with a little bit of polka dot trim. And look at the bike that they've got prepared for de Gent. Nice. Black shorts, though, so it's not all bad.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone the full Pierre Roland, which anyone who remembers that polka dot horror show back in the days of Europcar and Pierre Roland a few years ago, well, probably when you close your eyes and go to sleep, it'll flash in front of you and jolt you awake again. That really wasn't one of the best, cycling's most sartorial moments. Going back to Adam Blythe, the newly crowned British road race champion, we haven't seen him race yet, so we don't know for sure what that kit's going to look like, but you were saying you suspected it might be the full white.
I think he's going to be bling-tastic if I know Adam, and I know Adam well. And it's probably one of the few people that can pull it off, because he'll just love it so much. I think that there won't be anything that's not white. It'll be sparkling. It might even add some sparkles to it.
Movistar kit has a hint of sparkle about it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Movistar are quite visible as well. Erviti, their big man, just shepherding Nairo Quintana around the front end of this peloton. So the number of GC teams, Team Sky as well, on the left-hand side of the road, Movistar on the right-hand side of the road, Astana just tucked in behind Movistar. And there's the white helmet of Fabio Aru, their undisputed GC leader now, in the absence in the leaderboard of Vincenzo Nibali. They do cross out of the Tarn-Garonne region into the Département du Tarn, but only for a few kilometres before they cross the border again and return to the Tarn-et-Garonne area where Montauban is. And the advantage is coming down, yeah. Well, that's typical of the Tour de France, isn't it? The agriculture, the farmers, always make sure that they remind people who does the hard work in the French countryside before the race returns to the heart of the country in Paris. What seems like still a very, very long way away.
Like there you see, this is the dead straight roads we were talking about. You can now see the that'll be the first time this breakaway has glimpsed the peloton in a long time.
There they are. Yeah, rolling roads, rising, and wonderful helicopter shots we always get from this particular phase of a race, with those foreshortening effects of the long lenses on the cameras.
And as you can see again, this is a relatively safe run-in. These roads stay like this almost the whole way to Montauban. There's a little bit of a deviation as they enter into it, and you can sense the peloton's a little bit more relaxed now. They're not all jostling quite so much as they were those first days in Normandy. It's kind of finding after yesterday. I think that will have a lot of the GC riders, leaders will have relaxed a little bit, knowing their form's there. But there's only a couple that we were surprised with, Tom Dumoulin being one of them, and Vincenzo Nibali another. And it looks like the wind there is blowing a bit of headwind now. It's can't quite see.
Yeah, looks like it. Mostly head, yeah.
But yeah, and that automatically relaxes the leaders a bit. They now kind of feel a bit more comfortable that their form is there. And then today they know is their last sort of flat day before tomorrow is the real. Tomorrow and the day after the first big test. And normally, Chris Froome and the Team Sky tactic that we've seen in the previous years, it's in these first mountain days where they really hit hard and try to make the time gap. So it's going to be a relative day of rest for those guys before they know what's about to happen this weekend.
Well, if you're looking to spot Mark Cavendish in the peloton, it just got a little bit harder because essentially Peter Sagan lost the yellow jersey and he reverts to green, the competition he leads. Mark Cavendish doesn't lead that competition. He's in second place in the green jersey competition, so he drops down to plain old team kit today. The white of Dimension Data, that is what Mark Cavendish will be wearing. Marcel Kittel also is in just his plain team kit for Ethics Quick-Step today. Andre Greipel's very distinctive though, isn't he, in the white jersey. The only rider in a white jersey from Lotto Soudal with the German national champion stripes. And Brian Coquard too, well, he wears the kit that you're looking at now at the front of the race for Direct Energie. Very slight, and that head-on shot of Kittel sprinting against Coquard was extraordinary, really, wasn't it? Two more different physiques in a bunch sprint you could hardly imagine.
No, Coquard is quite petite for a sprinter. Normally they are big and powerful. I mean, Mark's relatively small height-wise, but he's still got a kind of a sprinter's physique, whereas Coquard could equally look a bit like a climber. So it does happen, but not very often that you have sprinters that are slight, if you like.
Yeah, you look at Brian Coquard and you wonder where all the power comes from, but it undisputably does come, and he's got a petrol-like acceleration. He was right on the limit trying to edge out Marcel Kittel, and perhaps you could argue his technique just on the ragged edge of the envelope got to just let him down a little, and he wasn't getting the best out of his bike. I don't know. It's hard to say. It was nothing was withheld on that sprint, and it wasn't quite enough. So you have to credit Marcel Kittel with hanging on.
Roads don't get much straighter than that.
No. Wonderful shot. Direct Energie bossing it at the front of the peloton. 31 kilometres to go. Well, I'm delighted to say after a very short break we're going to be joined once again by Robbie McEwen, who knows a thing or two about sprinting, so don't go anywhere. The great man is on his way. 30.8 kilometres and 41 seconds the advantage. They pass over Le Pont de Montricourt and the writing is on the wall for the breakaway now, and for the first time they see their advantage dwindling to around about half a minute, and it's getting a little bit ragged as well, the cooperation between Arashiro and Jan Bata. Arashiro, to my money, looks like he's getting a bit impatient and like he wants to lose the check for company and see how long he can stay out solo. Flick of the elbow from Bata though, and Arashiro goes through. So for now, at least, they're still working together. 29 seconds is all they've got. And further back down the road to Direct Energie, setting things up for Brian Coquard, are all over the front in an impressive show of strength at this point in the race anyway. 26.5 kilometres to go. Very pleased to say Robbie McEwen's dropped in for a few minutes just to help us out with unpicking this bunch sprint and what might happen. Brian Coquard is a man who's impressed us all, I think, and clearly impressed his teammates, otherwise they wouldn't be throwing down this sort of an effort for him.
Yeah, and even the Direct Energie tongues are starting to come out. Thomas Vauclair and his teammates, and Vauclair getting his share of camera time for the day. But really a show of confidence in Brian Coquard after he just came 2.8 centimetres short of winning a stage. Lost out to Marcel Kittel a few days ago. But realistically, there's not much more that Direct Energie can do for Brian Coquard. They can't overpower Ethics Quick-Step, Lotto Soudal for the lead out. So they're doing what they can, keep him up the front, assist in the chase. It's a bit of TV time for the sponsor as well. And I'm glad they've come to the front, because until now this stage has been a snooze fest. Let's be honest, it's been fairly pedestrian back in the bunch. But it's the kind of stage that riders in the Tour de France also need to recuperate somewhat.
Yeah.
I mean, they've still got to do the kilometres,
yeah,
but sit back, take it easy. Not many guys willing to go on a breakaway on a day like this, because they know the sprinters teams are going to come to the front and chase it back down. But there's always a couple of young adventurers, but a lot more action in the peloton at the moment.
Yeah, well, Direct Energie for now find themselves joined with company, and the GC team out to play. Team Sky are there, and so too are BMC with the yellow jersey in their midst.
Also seeing up there the riders from Fortuné, concept, and that'll be for Dan McClay, your bloke.
He is. We've been talking about him. Not out of the top 10 on any of the sprinter stages, and there's only 5 riders who've done that. Andre Greipel hasn't managed that, so there you go, Robbie.
Well, this stage finish, this final kilometre, it drops 7 metres over that final kilometre in altitude, so it's very slightly downhill, if you like. Doesn't feel like much. A couple of soft, a left and a right. Not real corners, but bends that you can't go absolute full sprint through at any stretch. But Dan McClay, for him, it's a stage finish that makes me think a little bit of the finish of a race he won in Grand Prix d'Annan earlier in the year, where he threaded the needle to come from about...
Have you seen that
I
sprint?
think
it's just
exactly.
remarkable.
He came from about 11th with 125 metres to go, and he won. It was quite incredible, and the video just went absolutely viral. For a guy like him, and also Brian Coquard for that matter, being a track specialist, this type of finish, they're going to find it hard to match up against the raw power of a guy like Greipel, and especially Kittel, who's got to be the big favourite on this finish. But they can ride the slipstream and try and come out at the last possible moment, just in that last 75 metres, with a jump and try and steal it on the line.
Well, Jan Barta just dropped the chain down into a really big gear and tried to break Arashiro, but the Japanese rider from Lampre Merida responded, and those two are still together, but the catch is very, very imminent now. Vöckler gets out of the saddle, and as Robbie's pointed out, the tongue has been out of the mouth as well. I don't think he's actually had it sponsored yet, Robbie, as you almost indicated, but we take
to advertise.
Robbie, just in a nutshell, no, you've got to go, but you rode in a great generation of sprinters and you beat them all repeatedly. What we're watching now, it's not far off a golden generation.
It is a great generation of sprinters when you look at Cav and Kittel and Greipel, and then some young up-and-comers like Coquard. We've seen him this year really start to establish himself, at least in this tour, as a guy who can compete with the best. So it is a really fun generation to watch, and watching Marcel Kittel really open it up. If it was just a straight line sprint in lanes, he'd win 99 out of 100, even against the white guy with the pink jersey on, and he's only got 1 horsepower.
Yeah, exactly.
Marcel's got at least 10.
Robbie, thank you very much. That was beautifully segued, and I don't think it's a gentleman, but it is a horse. Thank you very much indeed.
I was always talking about the horse.
Thank you very much indeed, Robbie. We'll catch up with you again next time we've got a flat sprinter stage. Thanks for your time now. The catch is imminent. 9 seconds. That's all they have now. Jan Barta trying to time trial his way away from this furious chase. It's pointless. Any minute now they will be swept up by a number of different sprint trains. Direct Energie, well, they still have the front of the race, and most of the other teams now are GC teams. You've got Movistar on the left side of the road, BMC in the middle, Tinkoff still there for, no longer for the yellow jersey, of course, of Peter Sagan, but they're still setting the pace high and keeping Alberto Contador safe. The polka dot jersey on domestique duty now for Andre Greipel today. That was a glimpse of Thomas de Gent. Where are the big sprinters trains? Well, there, just coming to the screen now, is Etixx Quickstep. They've got the blue jerseys on and the white jersey of Andre Greipel. He hasn't got his big guns up there this time, so it's a slightly different tactic at this point for Lotto Soudal. Although there, just standing upright like a lighthouse in the middle of the peloton, is the black helmet and red jersey of Marcel Seeberg, who's normally absolutely instrumental in setting things up for Andre Greipel. So where you see Seeberg, Greipel won't be too far away.
It looks like all the sprinters teams are playing a bit of a waiting game, and I mean, once this breaks courts, there's no chasing left, it's just positioning, and if they're positioned, they've got to try and position without actually wasting any of the precious teammates, because this is going to be, I think we're going to see an old school lead outs and proper, because they need to set with this, as Robbie said, it's a very fast sprint. It's got the slight sweeping bends within the last kilometre which will string it out, so it's all going to come down to who can time their lead out best.
Here we go. Look over your shoulders, because here comes Thomas Vöckler and Direct Energie. It's the end of the road for Arashiro and Jan Barta. No handshake there. Don't think they particularly enjoyed each other's company in the breakaway today, and it's all over. The race has come back together again. BMC in the middle, and a number of other GC teams now, and only one big sprinters train in evidence now, and it is the train of Direct Energie and Brian Coquard. Can he turn second place to Marcel Kittel into first? That's his ambition, and that's the ambition of his team. It's going to be fast, and it's going to be furious into Montauban, that's for certain. The race came back together again a few kilometres further back down the road. 17.6 kilometres remain to the finish line now, and it's all come together. Movistar Shepherd Nairo Quintana on the left-hand side of that roundabout. Meanwhile, Tinkoff choose the other side. Big wide roads allowing for that to happen. And further back down the road, well, Thomas Voeckler has done his bit. He drops to the back. And the rider in front of him is Sam Bennett, who's a sprinter, for heaven's sake, the Irish rider, but fell on stage 1 and has just been battling his way to stay in the Tour de France. All 198 riders who took to the start line in Mont Saint-Michel are still in this bike race. But Sam Bennett has suffered more than most, and it's just agony for him, literally, but also psychologically, to see these chances of mixing it in a bunch sprint on the Tour de France is just what he came here for, just slipping through his fingers, because clearly he's not going to compete today. He can't.
I think so, but at the same time, I don't think that will be... he'll be disappointed, of course. I think this biggest struggle at the moment is just making sure that he can stay in the race, and everything else is secondary. So I think he'll just be pleased to get it to the end within the time limit each day and not be at all worried about not being the sprints, to be fair.
Just being moved to the very, very front of affairs, the green jersey of, not these ones that you're looking at, but just over to the right of the Cannondale Drapac riders. If we get a glimpse, you'll find the green jersey of Peter Sagan. Yesterday's maillot jaune, now the maillot vert. There he is, the green jersey. He's been competitive in the bunch sprints so far, and you would not rule out a Peter Sagan victory. It would be a surprise, for sure, getting the better of Kittel and Cavendish. Doesn't happen often, but from time to time it does happen. And there's Steve Cummings as well for Dimension Data. Not at the back of the peloton, but right up at the front, and he'll be working today for Mark Cavendish. Again, that's something you don't always see from Steve Cummings, but nice to see him contributing today.
Yeah, it's a good indication of the fact that he's feeling good, because I think the next couple of days are going to be good stages for Steve Cummings as well.
If you're looking to spot Mark Cavendish, he is wearing the white standard team kit. He's just gone through the shot, actually, so he's handily placed in about 30th wheel. His team, however, distributed around the peloton, so Steve Cummings may be there in the white and black kit with a white helmet, but the rest of the train is distributed throughout the peloton, and they certainly haven't, like Lotto Soudal have, got themselves into a big line, and they're not intending to throw down a big lead out for Mark Cavendish. It's going to be instinctive with him again. He'll rely for sure on Edvald Boasson-Hagen and on Mark Renshaw in the closing stages, but it's not their style to try and boss things in the way that you would expect Ethics Quickstep and Lotto Soudal to do. And today, Direct Energie.
No, I think they're running quite a smart race at the moment. Dimension Data, what I imagine Mark Cavendish will do, the tactic he'll employ will anticipate Lotto Soudal, Ethics Quickstep doing the big drag race in the final few kilometres, and he'll use Bernie Eisel to place Edvald Boasson-Hagen, Mark Renshaw and himself up there with them. So in theory they wait until within 2-3 kilometres to actually be at the front, and then they try and do. Bernie Eisel will position them, he'll pull off, Edvald Boasson-Hagen will place Renshaw within 500 metres, and then Renshaw does his final kick to set up Mark Cavendish, and that would obviously be the perfect dream scenario. But of course Lotto Soudal will have their own plan, and so will Ethics Quickstep, so will Tinkoff, although Tinkoff is a little bit different in that Sagan will almost be on his own. He might have Roman Kreuziger help him a bit, but their team was built around Alberto Contador. And so he'll really be similar sort of tactic to Mark Cavendish, but he's just going to piggyback all the other trains. But we can see Lotto Soudal, they're waiting and waiting and waiting. Ethics Quickstep, they're a bit further back, we can't even see them, they've been very quiet. So I think we're just going to see they're all waiting for the sort of 5k mark, they're all calling each other's bluff and waiting to see who's going to lead it out first.
Yeah, still a long way to go, isn't there? 14.3 kilometres, and it is mostly GC teams at the front. You can see Fabio Aru with Astana on the left-hand side of that traffic island, just getting himself further up, being moved up to the front of the race. And this is exactly what Dave Brailsford was talking about, wasn't it? And Mark Cavendish consistently complains about, is this confusion between GC teams and sprinters' trains, and you're seeing a really good example of it today. Yeah,
but I think it's the way it always has been. It's been like that for a few years now, and you can understand why. There's so much at stake. If you want to win the GC at Tour de France, you have to be at the front every day, and you can't just sit back and relax and hope to make it through. You've got to reduce reduce the risk, and you really reduce the risk as being as far forward as possible with as few riders in front of you, because it's the riders that cause the problems.
Imanol Erviti from Movistar, doing the hard work, the grunting work at the front. Giant Alpecin have Tom Dumoulin in their number as well, and presumably are riding today for John Degenkolb, who's still returning to fitness and hasn't been competitive yet on the Tour de France, but he'll be getting stronger with each passing stage, no doubt about that. He's a tough character as well, John Degenkolb, and I'm sure he'll want to stay all the way to Paris as Team Sky make a big effort to get to the front of the race now. Where's Chris Froome? Well, he's in fourth wheel in that train with Geraint Thomas just tucked in behind him.
And you can see this is almost purely GC teams in the front of, well, 4 of the 6 that are lined up there. Now it'll be Ian Stannard, Kirienka, who's just moving to the front there. So he'll do Kirienka, who is, well, the reigning world time trial champion, so who can be counted on to do a few kilometres on his own, and then he'll peel off and hand it over to Ian Stannard and Luke Rowe. And they'll try and get at least beyond the 3-kilometre mark, where in theory, if an incident does happen, they'll be protected under the 3-kilometre rule. But at the same time, they'll probably try and keep it going even further, because it's still a grey area, that 3-kilometre rule regards what counts and what doesn't. Have you been caught up in a crash? Did you have a mechanical? As usual, the rule was slightly changed for the Tour de France. I think everyone's a bit confused and doesn't trust it completely.
Well, with 12.3 kilometres to go, there's a blunt look to the front of the peloton, and that's because a number of different trains have developed along the wide road, and it's essentially a protection racket at the moment. Everyone trying to keep their main men safe. A watching brief in the peloton. Words exchanged, the tension growing with each passing kilometre. Still a jostle for position. Giant Alpecin have opted for the left-hand side of the road now, and they have strength in numbers. Sylvain Chavanel is the next rider for Direct Energie, the former repeated French time trial champion, newly signed for the team of Thomas Voeckler, and of course Brian Coquard, and he's doing a lot of work now to set things up for their sprinter.
So as you can see with Michael Schär, who's the BMC rider who's riding next to Sylvain Chavanel, and Kirienka on the right. The idea when you're at the front there is not to go faster than the person next to you, which is why Michael Schär has put his hand, because the moment you do that, which is what Ian Stannard's just done now, you start to cause confusion, and then it starts to get swamped behind. Look at Alberto Contador's face there. He's definitely not looking good.
It's hurting again, Contador. He's hurting again. That's tough. Roman Kreuziger just in front of him, the Czech mountain domestique, really, who's been doing an awful lot of work on the flat, not just to keep Contador safe, but also to set things up on occasion for Peter Sagan. He's looking very strong, Kreuziger, and if Contador's going to do anything on this Tour de France, he's going to need that man, because he's looking good.
Although he didn't wait for him yesterday, there was not even a hesitation. He just kept up the front, Roman Kreuziger, when Alberto Contador was dropped off the back, which is completely possible that in the confusion he was completely unaware that Contador had been dropped off the back, but at the same time you'd have thought he would have been fully aware of what's going on, because that's his job, it's his leader.
So an Englishman and a Welshman at the front of the Tour de France now. That's Ian Stannard, and on his wheel Luke Rowe, who's clearly got over the disappointment of losing out to Portugal for his beloved football team yesterday, as has Geraint Thomas with the white glasses, his trademark look on the Tour de France. So Team Sky have their big guns, including Vasil Kirienka on the front, and Sergio Henao just taking the back wheel of Chris Froome and keeping him safe.
And you see Bergard there in the BMC kit, just telling them just to calm down. He's telling Sylvain Chavanel, look, we've got the road blocked, it's a narrow road, let's just keep it like this. You don't have to go fast, because it's just going to cause confusion. Now you'll see they basically create a wall across the road and stop people from accelerating and wreaking havoc. That's what you do. So you've got Ian Stannard there on the front and the left, Sylvain Chavanel. They'll look around and they'll just try and keep it calm down and keep a steady pace now for as long as they can, because it's inevitable that it's going to rip to pieces soon.
The yellow jersey of the Tour de France, Greg van Avermaet, takes them through 10 kilometres to go. He is on the front and looking from left to right to see what's going to happen next. There's a number of teams trying to set the pace at this point. It is high, and from time to time there's been a bit of dispute about who's going to set things up and what pace to determine. Sylvain Chavanel has been doing a lot of work on the front for Direct Energie. BMC are there, Tinkoff are there, with Alberto Contador looking agonised again. He's looking very, very distressed, like he's riding through a lot of pain, which I'm sure he is, and it's tough to watch actually, Contador being put through the mill every day. Further back down the road, well, Thomas de Gent in the polka dot jersey has dropped off. Michael Murcu continues to struggle in the colours of Katusha. He's at the back, and so too is Steve Cummings. Caught a glimpse of Cummings a little while ago, right on the front of the race, but he's drifted back through the peloton now. and out of contention in terms of setting things up for Mark Cavendish. We haven't seen Cavendish for a while. You can see the green jersey of Peter Sagan, though, right in the middle of the screen now, and he is in just where he wants to be, in about 20th or 30th wheel.
You can see the only sprinters team at the front there at the moment is Direct Energy, and that's it's like Robbie McKeown said, that they can't do much in the actual final lead-outs. They're trying to contribute as much as they can now. This is what they can do. They can position Coquard for as long as possible, and then the bottom line is when the big lead-outs come, which they will, and the interesting thing is they're all playing the same game. They're all trying to leave it as late as possible. That's why we can't see them now, and that's why the GCE teams have taken advantage of just coming to the front and shutting it down, and that's why it looks quite relaxed at the moment, and that's because it is at the front. They're just trying to control it and keep it all calm for as long as possible, so that makes it safer. Although saying that, now behind, everyone's so close together. You can see how much slower it's gone. That's because the GC teams at the front have just shut it down and just blocked the whole road. Now soon, the sprinters teams will fight their way through the moment the road opens up, and that's when the lead-outs will start.
Yeah, what do they used to say in the old wartime films? It's quiet. It's too quiet. It's got that air about it, hasn't it? That something's about to explode out of this pack. It's not a day for the GC teams. It's not their race, not their stage. It doesn't belong to them. That's what they'll be thinking further back down, and their pace, especially on this 90-degree right-hander, gets ratcheted right off as they all spin round. And then out of their saddles to accelerate and get back on.
You can see Etix Quickstep on the left moving up slowly, Lotto Soudal a bit further up on the right. So the teams will be, sprinters teams are getting together, and now they're going to start moving up each their own. But they're the two biggest teams, so we're going to see a battle royale between Lotto Soudal and Etix Quickstep, because this is the first time we've seen them saving everything for the lead-out.
Spectator just took a tumble into that ditch at the side of the road, just trying to get as close as she possibly could to the action, and you can get close. It's one of the joys of the Tour de France, but not too close. The helicopter looks down on this approach road into Montauban. It's pretty flat, the odd rise, but nothing much more than that, and then probably an aggregate drop all the way to the finish. That's what happens to the riders who've done so much work at the front. When they are spent, and 3 of the Direct Energy riders drop out of the race at the back, and they'll just roll in now. Meanwhile, one of their strongest, Sylvain Chavanel, continues his shift on the front. Team Sky still with numbers. Giant Alpecin with the white jerseys tucked in behind them, with virtually their entire team up front.
Lotto Soudal aren't really in the best position there. They're in the middle of the peloton, which makes it very difficult for them to move through. They're a little bit scattered. You saw them kind of just all a little bit apart from each other, and then contrary to that, a little bit further back on the left of the road is Etix Quickstep. Now being on the side of the road is a much better place to be, because you can wait for the gaps. There you can just see in the shot there's Etix Quickstep behind there, and they, as soon as the road opens up, they'll come charging up.
Patience, patience, that's what they've got to display at the moment. The red jerseys of Lotto Soudal are evident in the middle of the pack. The other red jerseys that you can see are the Katusha jerseys.
As dimension data as well, congregating slightly together on the left behind the SkyTrain, so they're in a good position. There's Andre Greipel's made it up, so he's there, but his teammates aren't quite there with him yet, so he's up there on his own. His teammates are stuck in the middle behind him. He's got one, they're just all there to the left of him, but slightly behind, which is probably a good place, because at least they can see their sprinter, they know where he is, that they have to get to him now.
Yeah, there's a bit of confusion between those two teams with white jerseys on. Team Giant Alpecin are tucked in behind Team Sky, but look at those other white jerseys behind them now. There are 4, 5, 6 of the Dimension Data riders, and one of them is Mark Cavendish. So some way down the pack on the left-hand side of the road, that's where Mark Cavendish finds himself now. Andre Greipel, on the other hand, has worked himself far, far closer to the front of the race now. A glimpse of the white jersey tucked in behind Direct Energy's train. 6.3 kilometres to go, and apart from those 3 Direct Energy riders who've dropped off the back, pretty much everyone else is still in this chase. Team Lotto Jumbo get to the front. Robert Wagner, etc., looking after their Dutch national road race champion Dylan Groenewegen. He rides alongside Peter Sagan in the green jersey with Greipel together, those 3 sprinters just in a little cluster on the right-hand side of the road as Chavanel continues to work on the front. Now it's Luke Rowe's turn to set the pace for Team Sky, and a glimpse over his shoulder to see that Chris Froome is still there, and Geraint Thomas is taking the back wheel of his main man.
And here you have Lotto Soudal coming with 5Ks to go. This will have been their plan then, I suppose, that 5Ks would be the moment they start congregating at the front. So now he's got 3 riders in front of him, he's got 1 behind him, so there's still got to be some other Lotto riders, I'm sure, that are going to come up, because they haven't had to do much work today, so he should have a full complement of men.
Yeah, he's got Tony Galopin there. He's got Jürgen Roelandts just in front of him where he wants to be. It might be Greg Henderson somewhere in that mix as well. Working for him. Adam Yates at the back. He's not going to contribute today. Watch out for Orica Bike Exchange, though. Michael Matthews is full of ambition today. And so too is Dan McClay for Fortuno Vital Concept. And you can see the green helmets and the black jerseys of Fortuno Vital Concept there in about 10th wheel. So McClay wants to be competitive again, and why not? 3 top 10 finishes so far for the Briton making his debut on the Tour de France, the sprinter. Under 5 kilometres to go now.
What is quite remarkable, you see here, you see the green jersey of Peter Sagan there on the wheels, just behind Greipel at the front there, behind the red jerseys of Lotto Soudal. His teammates are all behind, more looking after Contador. It's very rare to see a green jersey who is essentially doing it all on his own. He doesn't have a lead-out man, he doesn't have that team around him. He kind of free reins this, which is pretty incredible, really.
Now, McClay has 2 domestiques there. Vegard Brain being one of them, the Norwegian who was in a breakaway in the early stages of this Tour de France. Very, very strong man. And I think Fonseca might be the other lead-out man working for Dan McClay today as well.
So this is them just entering the outskirts of Montauban. And now this is where they speed up. It's still got Direct Energy who are just keeping their Brian Coquard in place, which is, they're doing a great ride actually, because it's saving him even though they can't help him in the very final part, they're saving him a lot of energy by keeping him there and keeping him out of trouble.
Well, we've been here before. Lotto Soudal on the front of the race. The 2 Lotto teams, one from Belgium and the other one from the Netherlands in the yellow jerseys. They hit the front now, and Direct Energy don't want to relinquish their pole position in this bunch sprint, and once again they accelerate and move Brian Coquard up the road. He's still got 3 domestiques working for him, so a very, very strong team display from Direct Energy. Can he repay their faith today?
What's interesting, again, like the other days, Lotto Soudal are in front before the other sprinters' teams, and I don't know whether that's because Greipel gets nervous, but we see Etixx Quick Step are nowhere ready to be seen yet. Same with Dimension Data, and yet Lotto Soudal on the left are already there using up guys. So I'm not sure whether that's the best move, but it might prove to be, because maybe they know they've got the strength to do it. But it's interesting, we can't see there on the right. You can see at the bottom of the screen is Dimension Data moving just behind the giant riders with the 2 stripes, and then we're going to have Etixx Quick Step who are still invisible.
So too is Mark Cavendish. No sign of the white jersey of Mark Cavendish just yet, anywhere near the front. Etixx Quick Step, they've got 40 riders in front of them, they're trained, but they do tend to leave it late, and they will come with a charge, I'm sure of that, later on, as 2 Tinkoff riders go to the front, and the green jersey, their main man for the sprint, is in about 20th wheel, 30th wheel, Peter Sagan.
He's glued to Andre Greipel's wheel there, so he's using the Lotto Soudal lead out, and he's got the wheel he wants, and he's going to fight to keep that. See Mark Renshaw in the middle of the screen behind the Cofidis riders, so he's up there. He's just waiting for Edvald Boasson and Mark Cavendish to make it up to him, which is a good place for him to be. It means he doesn't have to see the acceleration to move up, and he's finding himself in Dutch national champion Groeneweggen's wheel there, so he's going to fight for that, because that's a good place to be, because Lotto Jumbo is sitting there getting ready for their lead out. Lotto Soudal now moving up on the left, knocking him around, and there still can't see Mark Cavendish. He's got to be coming up soon.
Lotto make their big move. Lotto Soudal, that is, trying to get Greipel closer to the front. Seberg doing the work for him. Another team to emerge at the front of the race now is Katusha. Alexander Kristoff being guided towards the front. He's got 2 men working for him in the final 2.1 kilometres. Seberg battles out of the saddle. He's still got men to spare as Andre Greipel, and he is where he wants to be as they come through 2 kilometres.
Etixx Quick Step we see for the first time on the left of the screen, so they're on the right of the peloton, but getting knocked around again. So this is an ideal position. Look at Peter Sagan coming up on the left, dodging riders. So that's got Lotto Jumbo leading, Lotto Soudal behind them, Groeneweggen's in a good place, so Michael Matthews on Greipel's wheel. Peter Sagan's trying to fight back up. He lost Greipel's wheel, which is the wheel he wanted. Mark Cavendish, they're coming up on the bottom of the screen. We see Etixx Quick Step fights. They're doing a late charge. This is the tactic they've obviously decided on. Mark Renshaw is, Mark Cavendish, I think, sitting on Marcel Kittel's wheel, so he's chosen that wheel.
Left-handed, they go with a couple more twists and turns before they enter the final straight, and even then there's one more bend to negotiate. 1.4 kilometres to go. Etixx Quick Step beginning to show their colours. Max Richese, Fabio Zabatini, and a couple of wheels further back, just sitting behind Geoffrey Soup from Cofidis. You can see the blue jersey of Marcel Kittel just coming into the frame now, and now the green jersey moves onto the wheel and past the wheel in a minute of Dylan Groenewegen. I know he sits on, so there you go. Through 1 kilometre to go. Marcel Kittel and the green jersey are neck and neck.
And look at Peter Sagan, he's doing this all on his own, just dancing around, picking wheels, dropping back, coming forward. But look at Etixx Quick Step, they've timed this to perfection. They've come on from behind, and look, Peter Sagan's got himself on Marcel Kittel's wheel, so he's been dancing around and finally found it.
Edward Toons is being led out for Trek Segafredo, so don't rule him out as well. He's got a strong finish. Marcel Kittel is in about 7th wheel, locking onto the green jersey of Peter Sagan. That's where the action is, on the right-hand side of the road. Where is Coquard? No sign of Coquard at the moment. That's one of his domestiques riding for him. Cavendish sits behind the German. You can barely see Mark Cavendish because he is obscured by Marcel Kittel's huge frame. Kittel opens up his sprint. Cavendish tries to come on terms with him, tries to get past him, battling with Alexander Kristoff as well in the mix, but it's between these two men, Cavendish and Marcel Kittel. Cavendish gets there. Cavendish takes the win. He punches the air. It's close again, but this time there was daylight between first and second, and I'm pretty sure we know the result. Mark Cavendish gets the better of Marcel Kittel for the second time in his career, and he takes an extraordinary third win on a Tour de France that is becoming for him a Tour of Triumph.
I think Maclay was up there in 3rd place. Well, he looks fit, which would be an incredible result. But yeah, Marcel Kittel.
Well, there's Dan Maclay with the black and green there. He's unable to celebrate. Not entirely sure where he finished because the eye is drawn to the former world champion, Mark Cavendish, who has just won for the 3rd time on the 2016 Tour de France. The helicopter shot will reveal all. There comes Cavendish, and he absolutely soars past Marcel Kittel. There's no doubt about the win this time. Kittel well and truly beaten, but look at Dan Maclay. He doesn't even get 2nd place, does he? Not quite, not quite. But he's on the podium of the Tour de France. A remarkable ride from the man from Leicester in his first ever Tour de France.
That was, I mean, that's the first time we've seen Marcel Kittel get beaten like that in a drag race. It was, that's the real deal. There's no arguing there. That was a fantastic sprint. And seeing Maclay coming up, that was, again, he was the 2nd fastest guy there, although he got 3rd in the stage. He was coming up so quickly. And Marcel Kittel, at its quick step, the way they timed that was amazing. We didn't see them until 2Ks to go. So obviously their tactic was a little bit risky, but it worked. And that's what you have to do. You have to have the confidence to do that. But once again, Lotto Soudal, I think they were just there too early.
Well, he's done it again. He has done it again. Win number 29 in the Tour de France. Daylight between him and the rest in the bunch sprint. And daylight now between Mark Cavendish and Bernardino. He moves clear of Bernardino in the all-time stage winners list of the Tour de France. And only Eddy Merckx now lies ahead of him in those rankings. 34 Eddy Merckx won. Cavendish has 29 to his name, and the latest came in Montauban. Stage 6 goes to Mark Cavendish.
More work for the graphics department as Mark Cavendish's stage win total goes up from 28 to 29. I'm sure they won't mind. We'll take a break. We'll be hearing from Cav and all the participants in that sprint, we hope, including Dan Maclay with a sensational 3rd place after the break. Well, we've seen this plenty of times before, 28 times before to be exact, but we've never seen it with Daniel Maclay to his left. Mark Cavendish's brilliant 29th Tour de France career victory, with a man coming up on his outside who may one day take over, or at least emulate him with the odd stage win. And this is what it meant to the team boss, Doug Ryder. Actually said to us the other day, if Cav wins another stage, you might have to put me in a home. I don't know whether that was through sheer joy or the stress of dealing with his prima donna sprinter. But he's a prima donna who produces regularly. Here's the stage result. Mark Cavendish from Marcel Kittel again. Daniel Maclay with a brilliant 3rd place. Alexander Kristoff 4th. Christophe Laporte sprinting because Nasser Bouhanni's not here, a very creditable 5th. Peter Sagan 6th. Dylan Groenewegen 7th. Edward Toons 8th. Brian Coquard 9th. And Shane Archbold 10th. Andre Greipel, by the way, not on that graphic, 15th, didn't really contest the sprint, but among those who it was contested by, Mark Cavendish was once again preeminent. Let's hear from him.
Mark, 3rd stage victory on the Tour de France. Can you first of all take us through this win?
Oh my God, that was terrifying. That was like the old days, just wheel surfing, you know. Honestly, I said this morning, like there's 2 finish lines, there's one with like 12 to go and went on this small road. A little bit too far back, Bernie and I, into that. So it was just carnage in the final. There was guys coming everywhere and twisty and turny. I wanted Kittel's wheel, and I was fighting for Kittel's wheel. I knew the quick step, they weren't that organised, but I knew they'd get it on the final. Long, fast running. knew it'd be the right thing to go early because it was slightly downhill, put the bigger gear on again. And yeah, I just went. Actually, I maxed out. I should have put an even bigger gear on. But I kept going to the line. I really wanted it. Felt Kittel coming on my side again. But I just did what he's always done to me for the last 3 years and just kind of held him at it. So I'm very happy with that.
And that's one more than Bernard Hinault.
Oh yeah, I didn't really think of that. I'm actually more thinking about my little brother. He had a little baby girl yesterday, so I'd like to dedicate this win to my little niece Darcy, who was born yesterday. So.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks.
Yeah, congratulations to the Cavendish family. Darcy, a bit young to be on the podium picking up the flowers. I think that's still Delilah's job, although she might have gone home. But, Chris, we were looking for Mark Cavendish. He said he was too far back. We thought he was too far back, but I think a lot of it might have been he was hiding behind Marcel Kittel.
Well, precisely that. I mean, that was the point I was going to make, that he's about a third smaller, and on terrain like that, he's getting sucked along. And talking about terrain, that's what helped it, actually. He talked about it being dicey, but it got it down, gave them room to work, and it's a lot better. You can see that he's coming off Kittel's wheel now and absolutely storming through, but it was a drag race in the true sense of the word all the way to the line here, shoulder to shoulder. But looking at Dan McClay coming up from behind, or at 2-3 lengths back at the moment, and almost gets level with the two top sprinters in the world. So that's fantastic for him for the future, amongst the best, well, the best sprinters that have ever been.
Absolutely. And Cavendish, he talks about using the Essex Quick Step train. Nobody's better at using other people's trains than Cav.
Yeah, and it's a theme that we've seen throughout this race, isn't it? That he's just had one or two riders, Renshaw in particular, to help him get it there or thereabouts, and then he's finding his own way. It's a formula that's working for him. He's not trying to set up a big train, and he can pick and choose really between who he thinks is going to be right for the day. And this was a typical Kittel course, flat and fast. Gets a nice good suck behind him, and then just slingshots through. So it was a beautiful day for him.
And once again, we saw Lotto Soudal up at the front, all lined out with about 3 kilometres to go, not working too hard, looking like they had everything under control, and then in the end, Greipel's nowhere.
It's a tricky one. It might be a bit of a psychological crutch, to be honest, to get all of your team in front of you, but unless they're going to pin everybody in place by injecting the pace, then the danger is you'll just get swamped and you get distracted trying to look for your teammates, and that few tenths of a second while you're trying to reorganise yourself, it's too late, you've been swamped. The nature of the last 2 kilometres there meant that it was just teasing the whole peloton into a long line and did give them room to move, but by that time it was too late for him. Kittel was too far back, and Greipel was too far back, and he knew it.
Yeah, it was funny, running in today, it seemed like quite a complicated finish, but you were saying, no, it's actually going to be safe because it will string everybody out. But interesting, when you look at the size, the bulk of Marcel Kittel, he creates a huge slipstream as Mark Cavendish goes up the back steps of the podium, waiting to come out the front in a minute or two. Kittel has a huge slipstream for Cavendish to get in. Once Cavendish hits the front, there's almost no slipstream at all.
No, and I've been in that situation too, in track racing before now, where you get big disparity in teams, and it makes a huge difference, and it's an advantage that he's naturally got, and nobody can do anything about it. He takes away more than he gives.
Yeah. Quick word for Christophe Laporte. I mean, suddenly, right before the Tour, Cofidis have their leader removed. Nasser Bouhanni gets into a fight at the French National Championships with a hotel guest, and so they're a headless chicken. He finishes 5th on his own.
Yeah, that was a good ride, but to be honest with Cofidis, I think they'll be better off at the moment just trying to get into breakaways like some of the other French teams are doing, and trying to win a stage that way. I mean, they're trying to execute a formula without a vital ingredient missing.
All right, so credit to Christophe Laporte, credit to Dan McClay, but the chief credit today goes to Mark Cavendish, who's about to reappear on the podium for the 3rd time this Tour.
He is indeed. Mark Cavendish just simply comes to life in July. Make no mistake about it. 1 month and 1 race matter to this man more than any other. So far this season, he has won a stage at the Tour of Qatar, the Tour of Croatia, and the Tour of California. With respect to all of those, though, those three achievements mean absolutely nothing in the face of the tidal wave of success that has come his way since he touched ground in France. It started at the first possible opportunity in Utah Beach, right up in the north of the country on the Cherbourg Peninsula, and we're in the foothills of the Pyrenees essentially now, and he's at it again. Remarkable athlete, and if we suspected over the last couple of years that we might be seeing the fading of the lights, we were wrong.
No, I think, yeah, we were all wrong, well, those who thought that. And no, I think he's man for the big occasions. He always has been.
Look at the name for the name in third place, Dan McClay as well. Gary and Chris were just talking about him, but that was just what a mouth-watering prospect it is. Dan McClay, as we look at Greg Van Avermaet getting his yellow jersey today. Good day out for him, safe as houses, but just a word about McClay from your perspective. We didn't know much about him, any of us really, other than a couple of internet phenomena that he became when he won a couple of minor races, it has to be said. He hasn't won on the Tour de France, but to come close as he did to Kittel and Cavendish suggests that he's got a great future. Yeah,
we were talking about him earlier today and saying how we were already very impressed by the fact he'd been top 10 in every sprint he's done so far in this race, and that was a great learning curve for him, because the Tour de France bunch sprints are like no other bunch sprints, and clearly he has been learning from them, and he's applied it to as close to perfection as he can. The two guys in front of him are the two best sprinters in the world, and Mark Cavendish is arguably the greatest sprinter of all time.
Well, Greg Van Avermaet is in yellow for another day. Mark Cavendish, though, still the story of the day.
Now let's just check the general classification for you. No real change. Greg Van Avermaet still has his 5-minute 11-second lead over Julian Alaphilippe. Alejandro Belmonte Valverde, or Valverde Belmonte to give him his full name, is third. Joaquim Rodriguez fourth. Chris Froome fifth. Warren Barguil sixth. Nairo Quintana seventh. Pierre Rolland has sneaked ahead of Fabio Aru into eighth. Dan Martin is 10th. Now then, tomorrow takes the race into the Pyrenees, and there's one fewer summit finish on this year's Tour, and really, the first day in the Pyrenees almost looks like a waste of the Col d'Aspin, because it's the only real mountain on tomorrow's stage, and the stage doesn't finish up it. However, the peak of the Aspin is only 7 kilometres from the finish in Lac de Péole, so it could be a descent that wins the day. It's up to the leaders whether they want to take it, but tomorrow's an invitation for someone to attack, and 2 o'clock is our usual live time for coverage of stage 7, highlights at 7 in the evening. Chris, what do you reckon about that? I mean, it sort of looks like a Romain Bardet day tomorrow, if I can say Romain Bardet day.
Well, I'm going to have a look tomorrow morning. I think it's going to be an interesting one. The GC contenders are probably going to treat it like a summit finish, because it could be first to the top. If you've got any kind of a gap, takes it all the way to the line. It does drag the last kilometre, but it's going to be all about that descent. They'll also be praying for good weather as well, because it could be a real difficult day if it's a wet descent.
Yeah, and I mean, even if there are no, dramatic gains on that descent, we're going to see again just what kind of shape Alberto Contador's in. And you don't want the confirmation of the worst, but you sort of fear that it will be.
No, the more people that play, frankly, the better it is for us to watch. There's more possibilities for some excitement, and for people to take a long shot that plays out more drama. At the moment, there's 2 strong favourites, and we need the other challengers to stay as close to them as they possibly can.
Now, Mark Cavendish with his stage win today also retakes the lead in the green jersey competition. We know he's not really interested in that. We know Peter Sagan will eventually overtake him regardless when the race gets into the mountains, and Peter Sagan picks up his regular points here and there at intermediates and at some stage finishes. But this is a byproduct of his success in stage wins, which is all he's focused on, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering at the start of this race, even though he'd stated his intention to get to Paris and, the Sprinters World Championships on the Champs-Elysees, I thought, with the Olympics, maybe not. But, the way it's going at the moment, there's actually something in him to get all the way through this race. His form's great, and then just see what happens at the Games.
Yeah, and we remember, and I think he remembers, how bad he felt when he was going well and pulled out under advice in 2008.
Yeah, and I think this is a different year. I mean, right now, the shape he's in, he may very well focus on this race and just see what happens at the Games. His form's good. He's got no time to train anyway after it. I think he may as well try and do that.
Quick word about Daniel McClay. We didn't know much about him coming in, but we're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. He mixed it with the absolute best today. He'll give him some confidence. We'll be watching out from him on the other sprint stages.
Absolutely. And we'll be hearing from him in the highlights show. We're currently camped out round the team bus, waiting for a word with Daniel McClay. We will see you back here at 7 o'clock for a recap of Mark Cavendish's 29th stage